Chapter 1054. As soon as Speaker Long finished speaking, Gu Nianji and Special Assistant Zhuang asked in unison, "Where did the Americans get this information? How did they know the names of our 27 soldiers?" Speaker Long's expression was gloomy as he clenched his fists. "This is also our problem." As he spoke, he placed the list of 27 soldiers in front of Gu Nianji. "Take a look. Do we still need to fight this lawsuit?" Gu Nianji looked at the list and immediately understood that it was the 27 Special Operations Forces members who had been in the central control room that day. She knew all of them. They were all her uncles and brothers who had watched her grow up. Seeing these familiar names become defendants in the American court, Gu Nianji felt it was unrealistic and absurd. She composed herself and skimmed through the indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice. The indictment was very thick, and Gu Nianji only read the summary at the top. The indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice showed that they had charged the 27 soldiers with 31 charges, including using phishing software to obtain passwords, hacking into the computer system of a secret U.S. laboratory to plant viruses, stealing advanced technical information, using virus commands to destroy computer hardware and software, as well as violating personal privacy and stealing business and trade secrets. They were demanding astronomical compensation. The court of prosecution was the Western District Court of the U.S. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the 27 Chinese soldiers were immediately wanted. Attached to the indictment was an arrest warrant issued by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI), with clear photos of the 27 military officers. Gu Nianji looked at the summary and laughed bitterly. The United States used a politically correct person as the Attorney General, so his professionalism had to be relegated to the second line. Otherwise, how could they have come up with such a ridiculous indictment? I'm guessing the American judiciary will pretend to be deaf and mute for a long time. It's so embarrassing. You mean they shouldn't sue? Of course not. First of all, according to the procedural justice of American law, the means of obtaining evidence must be legal and public in order to have legal effect. Look at the information of these soldiers. It's top secret in our country, so how did the Americans get it? Do they dare to reveal how they obtained the information? Gu Nianji knocked on the thick indictment. They definitely wouldn't dare to say it. Anyone with eyes could see that they must have obtained this information through illegal means. Either they got it from the spies or they used hackers to steal it from our system, just like how they accused us of cyber warfare. So what you're saying is that because they obtained the evidence illegally, this case is not valid at all. Speaker Long also studied law, so he was very familiar with legal issues. That's right, the U.S. court shouldn't have even filed the case. Gu Nianji smiled and shook her head. We have to forgive their ignorance and arrogance. You have to know that the United States has gone mad under the banner of political correctness. They can sacrifice fairness, efficiency, quality, and conscience for the sake of political correctness. That's why the previous U.S. government was no good. It was filled with mentally retarded people who relied on political correctness to get to where they were. In the current U.S. government, the president, who was addicted to tweeting, had yet to complete the replacement of government officials. Many senior government positions were still retained by the previous officials. The Minister of Justice who prosecuted the Wuxia Imperial soldiers had been appointed by the previous president. Speaker Long nodded. Nianji is right. Draft a rebuttal email and send it to me. I will forward it to the Interim Cabinet's Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Also, send a copy to General G. Gu Nianji nodded and returned to her office to draft a rebuttal email. She was very familiar with this kind of email, so she quickly criticized the other party's indictment with reason and restraint. From legal principles to legal provisions, from logic to common sense, she criticized everything thoroughly. The email was less than 300 words long, but it was already a very exciting court defense thesis. Speaker Long read the email and clapped his hands in approval. He immediately forwarded it to General G, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their reference. General G and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs treated it like a treasure. They used Gu Nianji's rebuttal email as a basis to reply to the unreasonable demands of the United States. Only the Wuxia Imperial Ministry of Justice didn't take Speaker Long's forwarded email seriously. Because the Minister of Justice had been single-handedly appointed by Prime Minister Tan Dongbang, he had always followed Tan Dongbang's lead. Tan Dongbang's position as Prime Minister was in jeopardy, but the Minister of Justice still hadn't given up on him. He acted like the Prime Minister's lackey. As soon as he received the indictment from the United States Department of Justice, he was dumbfounded and immediately went to Tan Dongbang for advice. Tan Dongbang called Kai Songyin over to listen to the Minister of Justice's report with her in the Prime Minister's office. He then read the summary of the indictment and felt a surge of excitement. Wasn't this matter highly possible? Tan Dongbang looked eagerly at Kai Songyin. Songyin, what do you think we should do about this matter? Kai Songyin understood what Tan Dongbang meant as soon as he spoke. She flipped through the indictment and thought to herself, could it be that Tan Dongbang's fate as prime minister wasn't fated to die? If this matter was hyped up, perhaps she could still get a share of the spoils of the interim general election vote. Kai Songyin held the thick stack of indictment and said, I have to go back and think about what to do. Fine, go think about it quickly. Tan Dongbang actually had his own ideas and was eager to try them out. However, Kai Songyin had accumulated power for a long time, so he always instinctively sought her opinion first, especially on important matters. Kai Songyin left Tan Dongbang's prime minister's office with the indictment and returned to her own building. When Tan Guirin returned from the Senate building in the morning, she discovered that her father, Tan Dongbang, was in a meeting and her mother was also attending the meeting, so she didn't see anyone. She took an afternoon nap after returning and heard from the servants that Kai Songyin had already returned from outside. She hurriedly changed and went to the door to block it. Seeing Kai Songyin, Tan Guirin flew over like a butterfly. Mommy. Little darling, why didn't you sleep more? Kai Songyin stopped in her tracks and smiled as she watched Tan Guirin jump into her arms. Hugging Tan Guirin, Kai Songyin said kindly, why didn't you sleep more? Mommy, I've already slept much better. Tan Guirin hugged Kai Songyin's arm. Mommy, I have to tell you something. That Director Hong is a complete and utter bad person. Kai Songyin was speechless. Little darling, don't worry about these outside matters. Just focus on your violin. Kai Songyin stroked Tan Guirin's long black hair. How was your time in the military art troupe? It was all right. Tan Guirin felt relieved that the message had been delivered. Mommy, I went to the troupe to practice my violin in the afternoon and won't be back until tonight. Go. I'll have Old Chang drive you there. Old Chang was Kai Songyin's family's chauffeur. Tan Guirin happily left in the car, and Kai Songyin finally had the opportunity to read the indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice. She read the indictment from a different perspective than Gunyenji. Kai Songyin read it from the perspective of sensationalizing news and entertainment. As she expected, there were too many things that could be hyped up in the indictment. There were only 4 days left before Tan Dongbang would be participating in the election again. They had to seize the high ground of the news. It was the third night watch and it was still the third night watch today. Chapter 1055. Xingnan, there's something you need to help me with. Kai Songyin called Kai Xingnan over and showed her the complaint from the U.S. Department of Justice. Help me translate it into Chinese, then ask your father what to do. Kai Songyin's eldest brother, Kai Sumin, had just returned from the United States. He was a legendary figure in the early years of the American legal world and had once helped a U.S. president settle an impeachment case with the Senate's grand jury. However, because he was now an American citizen, Kai Songyin couldn't show him the complaint directly and ask for his opinion. However, Kai Xingnan was still a Wuxia citizen, so it wasn't a problem for her to help as a legal consultant. Kai Xingnan glanced at it and was stunned. Is this really a complaint from the U.S. Department of Justice? How can the court file something like this? Kai Songyin smiled meaningfully. Not only is it, but it's already been filed. Kai Xingnan was speechless. Help me translate it first. Remember to translate it according to the legal terms used by the Wuxia people, then ask your father for his opinion. Kai Songyin reminded Kai Xingnan of a few things to take note of before letting her leave. Kai Xingnan immediately took the photocopied legal documents and complaint back to her family's villa. Her family's villa was halfway up the mountain near the Xiatangshan hot springs, so it was quite far from the imperial capital. Kai Xingnan's father, Kai Sumin, had returned to the empire to help his sister and brother-in-law, but he couldn't let others know he was helping them. Therefore, in order to hide it, he lived far away and only contacted his daughter. Since returning to the empire, he had only had one family reunion dinner with the Kai family at the family's Sihiyuan. With so many Kai family members as foils, he had only been able to see his sister Kai Songyin and niece Tan Guirin once. As for Tan Dongbang, Kai Songyin was too embarrassed to bring him back to her parents' home. The Kai family was a century-old family that had greatly supported the founding fathers of the Wuxia Empire, so the current higher-ups still gave them face. If he could, he would lend a helping hand. Therefore, when Tan Guirin was in danger in New York, Kai Songyin was urged by Hong Kongquan to ask Hu Xiaoheng to personally go to the United States to save her. There were many higher-ups who interceded or pressured her. Hua Xiaoheng saw that he couldn't refuse, so he played along and completed Gu Nianji's background check as well as their marriage application. However, these higher-ups hadn't expected Tan Dongbang to be so suicidal. It wasn't that there weren't any higher-ups who played with women, but there was no one like him who played with himself like the male lead of a small movie. Therefore, when Tan Dongbang's incident blew up, no one from the higher-ups spoke up for him. No one was stupid, especially those who were in high positions. They were all shrewd people. Those who were slightly inferior, such as Tan Dongbang, were immediately pulled down, and they probably didn't even know who was messing with them. However, Kai Songyin had used the Kai family's connections, her own status in the media world, and her incredible luck to finally make Tan Dongbang the prime minister. Although he had only been in power for a short period of time, he was still a prime minister, and he did not step down because of impeachment. Kai Sumin had returned this time because he saw that his younger sister was truly too pitiful. His younger sister's husband had gone too far, making it so that he couldn't use his connections with the higher-ups. That was why he agreed to come back and help her turn the tide. Looking at the copy of the complaint that Kai Xingnan brought back, as well as the subpoena from the American court, Kai Sumin was also speechless. What the hell are these people from the U.S. Department of Justice? Do they really think they're little princesses and the whole world has to play politically correct with them? Kai Sumin pushed up his glasses. Just look at this Minister of Justice. His grades in law school were so bad that he almost couldn't graduate. Even he wants to play the law like politics? It wasn't impossible to play the law like politics, but the prerequisite was that you had to be very proficient in the law and also very proficient in politics. You couldn't play it as long as you were strong in one aspect. This Minister of Justice was obviously good at figuring out the intentions of the higher-ups and playing politics, but when it came to the legal aspect, he was completely clueless. That was why he came up with something that the whole world could see was an American thief calling for a thief. Kai Xingnan was very disappointed to hear that. Huh? Does that mean we can't do anything? According to Kai Sumin's opinion, looking at this kind of nonsensical thing was already giving it face, so they should just ignore it. Actually, Gu Nianji also thought the same way. Or rather, any normal lawyer would think the same way. However, lawyers who wanted to cause trouble were exceptions. For example, Kai Xingnan. Like Kai Songyin, she also felt that there was still hope. What do you mean? Kai Sumin glanced at her. Or is it your aunt's idea? Kai Xingnan smiled but didn't say anything. Kai Sumin understood and muttered, "Put it down. I'll think about it again." Kai Sumin didn't rack his brains. Instead, he made a round of calls to the United States. He had a wide network of contacts in the American legal community, so he asked about the U.S. Department of Justice's lawsuit against the Wuxia nation's military for launching a cyber war against the United States. Kai Sumin felt that something wasn't quite right as he looked at this indictment that was full of mistakes and would cause others to feel embarrassed when they read it. Although the U.S. government's level and ability had been pulled down because of political correctness, the United States still had the world's top elites. These elites were concentrated in a few departments that hadn't been affected by political correctness. For example, the U.S. Tax Administration, the financial giants of Wall Street, and another one was the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. The U.S. media even dared to mock the president, but not a single media dared to mock the CIA. This was a tacit understanding that the U.S. media couldn't openly declare. And based on Kai Sumin's understanding of the U.S. government, if the U.S. Department of Justice's indictment didn't have the CIA behind it, he could revoke his law license. So why would the elites of the CIA tolerate such a nonsensical document being filed in the court and sent to the higher-ups of the Wuxia Empire? As expected, Kai Sumin had an idea after making a round of phone calls. At breakfast time the next morning, Kai Sumin and Kai Xingnan sat in the spacious and bright American-style kitchen. Facing the lush spring scenery of Little Tang Mountain, Kai Sumin poured maple syrup onto a pancake as he gave instructions to Kai Xingnan. Kai Sumin handed her a translated legal document. Take a look and correct any typos. Kai Xingnan read through it and immediately prostrated herself in admiration. This was a cleverly worded translated document that repolished the U.S. Department of Justice's awkward position and unprofessional legal proposal. It could be said that if the U.S. Department of Justice used Kai Sumin's indictment to file in the court, it would be much more professional and reasonable than their original text. In Kai Sumin's Chinese translation, he revised the U.S. Department of Justice's rigid accusations. Although it was still 31 accusations, he emphasized that the United States had no intention of going against the Wuxia Empire's government. They would always resolve the problem peacefully and resort to the law only to make them take it seriously. It could be said that this was an indictment that fit the reading habits of the Wuxia Empire very well. From the higher-ups to the common people, the Wuxia people all had a miraculous temperament that was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Kai Xingnan felt like she had found a treasure. She brought her father's translated and polished indictment to the Prime Minister's official residence and handed it to Kai Songyin. "Auntie, my father personally translated this. Take a look and see if you can cooperate." Kai Xingnan took out her phone and found the news from the United States. "Look, can we cooperate to create hype?" Kai Songyin was ecstatic when she saw it and couldn't help but hug Kai Xingnan. "Thank you, Xingnan. Thank your father for me. I knew my brother was the best." Kai Songyin took the translated indictment and went to Tan Dongbang's office. They didn't have much time left, so one day at a time was one day at a time. Tan Dongbang was very reluctant to leave. He sat in his office and looked at everything around him. He told himself that if he could continue sitting there, he would do anything, even if he had to sell his soul to the devil. Almost overnight, all the major media outlets in the Wuxia Empire published the news of the United States Department of Justice suing the Wuxia Empire soldiers. Whether it was from the perspective of attention-grabbing news or from the perspective of the value of the matter itself, there was great potential for success. Not only did the media publish the original English summary of the indictment, but they also published a meticulously translated Chinese indictment. Compared to the original English summary, the meticulously translated Chinese indictment was as smooth as an angel's. Correspondingly, the domestic media suddenly reposted the hot news from the United States on a large scale. The news from the United States had more content than the indictment, and it could be considered an annotation to this strange indictment. It turned out that the reason the Americans were so aggressive in suing the 27 soldiers this time was because the famous hacker Pink Piggy had breached an important secret laboratory in the United States a few days ago. The United States claimed that the Pink Piggy had used the 27 soldiers as cover that night to launch a cyber attack on the United States, disregarding national morality and causing huge losses to the United States. In this regard, the Pink Piggy was the main culprit, and the 27 soldiers were accomplices. At the same time, Germany, the first country to be severely damaged by the Pink Piggy, spoke up. The German Chancellor suddenly announced a visit to the Wuxia Empire at this time, accompanied by Major General Reinitz of the German Federal Intelligence Service. They wanted to conduct important negotiations regarding the devastating blow that the Pink Piggy had caused to the German Federal Intelligence Service. Germany and the United States quickly revealed their bottom line. They could not sue the Wuxia Empire soldiers, but the Wuxia Empire must hand over the Pink Piggy. They requested that the Pink Piggy be extradited to Germany and the United States to be tried separately. As soon as the German news was announced, the domestic public media set off a new climax of revelry. They scolded the Pink Piggy for ignoring international law, causing the deterioration of relations between countries for her own selfish interests, and harming the interests of other countries. It was not in line with the spirit of a great country. They all said that if this continued, your country will be done for. In the name of the people, they strongly requested that the country hand over the Pink Piggy to Germany and the United States to deal with in order to appease the anger of the great countries. This was the first watch. It was still the third watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Let's persevere. Monthly tickets at 1 p.m. plus 3,900 plus updates, the third watch at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to the leader Moon Palace Mastera for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 1056. Gu Nianji had been forced to lose weight by Hua Xiaoheng the entire night, and before she almost fell asleep, she felt that she had really lost weight. The two of them had exercised a lot last night and only slept for a short while when it was almost dawn. However, Hua Xiaoheng still woke up at 7. He opened his eyes and immediately saw Gu Nianji sleeping soundly in the crook of his arm. After a night of entanglement, her fair and bright face was sparkling and translucent like a freshly peeled lychee. It was so tender that if one lightly touched it with their lips, they would be able to suck out the sweet juice within. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't hold back once he started kissing her. His swollen body screamed as the memory of last night's madness came back to him. In a daze, Gu Nianji began another round of weight loss. After it was over, Gu Nianji decided not to lose weight for the rest of her life. Losing weight is really killing me. You're awake. Hua Xiaoheng saw that Gu Nianji's eyelashes were trembling, but she refused to open them. How can I not wake up? Gu Nianji muttered. The bed was about to fall apart from his shaking. Hua Xiaoheng chuckled quietly in her ear. Gu Nianji, who was attracted to sound, blushed. She closed her eyes and reached out to push Hua Xiaoheng's face away. she said impatiently. If you want to laugh, go further away. Don't laugh in my ear. All right. Huo Xiaoheng readily accepted her advice and stopped laughing. He lay on his side next to Gunyanji and blew gently into her ear. Gunyanji felt half her body go numb. She wrapped herself in the blanket and quickly rolled away, muttering, "If you do this again, I'm going to counterattack. Come on, let's hurt each other." Huo Xiaoheng reached out and pulled her over. "I'll wait for you to ravage me." Gunyanji, she suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Huo Xiaoheng with sparkling eyes. Really? The 108 moves on how to eat Huo Xiaoheng surfaced in her mind. Huo Xiaoheng felt infinitely satisfied just looking into her eyes. He had just laid down and was about to pull Gunyanji onto his body when Gunyanji's phone rang untimely. She hurriedly leaned over and took it to have a look. Other than the caller ID, there were also a few text messages. Special Assistant Zhuang and He Jichu had both texted her. The call was from He Jichu. He probably couldn't help but call her when she didn't reply to his text. Gunyanji quickly swiped her phone to answer the call. Professor He? He Jichu sat in front of his computer desk and looked at the news online. He said dryly, "Nianji, are you at work?" Gunyanji looked at the time and cursed under her breath. It was already 8:10. She quickly pushed Huo Xiaoheng away and frantically got off the bed. She went to the bathroom and said embarrassedly, "No, I haven't left the house yet." He Jichu rubbed his tightly furrowed brows and said helplessly, "Don't worry. I'm just telling you that the United States and Germany have officially requested to extradite the pink piggy. You should be mentally prepared." Gunyanji froze. Extradite the pink piggy? When did that happen? All she did was sleep. How did she become a fugitive? Aren't the American courts suing those 27 soldiers? Could they be suing the pink piggy at the same time? Gunyanji tightened her grip on her phone. Ijichu laughed. "Looks like you really just woke up. You haven't checked the news on Weibo yet, have you? Go take a look. I'm hanging up now." After Ijichu hung up, Gunyanji quickly opened Weibo. All of a sudden, all sorts of trending searches clamoring for the country to hand over the pink piggy made her suffocate. Since when did "your country is doomed" become mainstream? Did they really think the silence of the silent majority meant they agreed? Gunyanji almost wanted to log into her alternate account and fight with these public guides. Huo Xiaoheng's knock stopped her just in time. "Nianji? What's wrong?" Huo Xiaoheng knocked on the bathroom door. "Can I come in?" Gunyanji opened the door casually and handed the phone to Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng took the phone and quickly scrolled through all the news articles. He smiled faintly and shook his head. Are these people's words worth getting angry over? Is this the first time you know how powerful these "your country" people are? Who told them to provoke me? Gunyanji said angrily. I'm the pink piggy. They want to hand me over and sell the country for glory. How can I not be angry? Why would I let them hand you over? Huo Xiaoheng patted her head. Unless they step over my dead body. Really? Gunyanji looked up in surprise. I'm so happy that you can say that. She grabbed Huo Xiaoheng's arm and shook it. She said firmly, however, I won't let anyone have the chance to step over your dead body. Because I won't let anyone have the chance to kill you. Huo Xiaoheng's heart warmed. He smiled and hugged her. I know. Me too. The warmth between the two didn't last long before they had to separate. Gunyanji had to hurry to the Senate. Special Assistant Zhuang had already sent her several text messages saying that Speaker Long wanted to see her. Gunyanji looked at her watch and hoped that she would arrive at the Senate building at 8:30. Huo Xiaoheng stopped teasing her and went to the bathroom in the guest room to wash up. When he came out after changing, Gunyanji had already left. Recently, whenever Huo Xiaoheng came to Gunyanji's suite, the two of them would move separately. They never appeared in pairs in the neighborhood. Huo Xiaoheng took the car keys to the underground parking lot and drove back to the headquarters. Gunyanji arrived at Speaker Long's office 1 minute past 8:30. Special Assistant Zhuang, who was already waiting there, quickly pushed open the door to Speaker Long's office. Nianji, hurry in. Speaker Long is waiting for you. Thank you, Special Assistant Zhuang. Gunyanji walked in and sat down in front of Speaker Long's desk. Speaker Long, what can I do for you? Speaker Long threw the morning news summary in front of Gunyanji and said, the German Chancellor is visiting the Wuxia Empire with the Director of the Federal Intelligence Service. I have to go to the airport to welcome them. You can come with me. Gunyanji's eyes widened in surprise. They're here so soon? But why are you the one going to welcome them? Speaker Long smiled bitterly. Because the cabinet has already been dissolved. It's a temporary cabinet now. The people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will go to the airport to welcome them, but we still need a head of government to oversee it. Tan Dongbang definitely can't represent our country anymore, and General Ji is from the military, so it's not convenient for him to make an appearance. So it's only an old man like me. Gu Nianji quickly smiled. You're old but strong. You don't look old at all. Little bootlicker. Speaker Long scolded her with a smile. Go back and pack. The German plane will arrive at 5 in the afternoon. You and I will go to the airport to welcome them. Gu Nianji thought about how Reinitz was also coming this time and felt very conflicted. She only found out that Reinitz was the director of the Federal Intelligence Service after she returned from Germany. Us, who tortured her and electrocuted her, turned out to be Reinitz's subordinates. Speaker Long, can I not go? Gu Nianji said hesitantly and lowered her eyes slightly. You can't go? Speaker Long raised his eyebrows and turned on the computer to check on the ceremony to welcome the VIPs at the airport in the afternoon. Why not? I'm afraid of strangers. Gu Nianji confidently found an excuse. I'm not used to meeting strangers. I see. Speaker Long could tell that she was being perfunctory and raised his hand disapprovingly. If you're not used to it, then you can get used to meeting more people. Alright, that's enough. Go back and prepare. Gu Nianji had no choice but to go back to her office to pack and then go home. She really needed to pick out a good outfit to welcome the foreign VIPs at the airport. Hong Kongquan was detained by Speaker Long's people in a small gray building. After he woke up in the morning, he read the newspapers for a while. He read the headlines of all the major newspapers with great interest. Then he saw the complaint from the American court and the Chinese translation. He also saw the trending American news forwarded by all the major media outlets. Pink Piggy? Hong Kongquan's pupils suddenly shrank. He looked at the English summary of the complaint and suddenly realized something was different. If he read it in a special word order, the summary of the complaint was actually sending him a message. This was the method that the owner of the invalid number taught him. Could it be that the real purpose of the complaint was to send him a message? Hong Kongquan's expression changed. He finally looked up and said to the person detaining him, I have important news to report to my superiors. I want to redeem myself. It was the second night watch, and the monthly votes had been delivered at 3,900 plus the second night watch. It was still the third night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. Let's persevere. It was 7 in the evening, the third night watch. Chapter 1057. You have important news to report to your superiors? The staff member who was holding him looked at Hong Kongquan in confusion. Director Hong, why didn't you mention this before? Hong Kongquan replied calmly, I didn't know this news was so important before, so I didn't mention it. When I saw the headlines today, I realized that I might have missed the most important news, so I hope to redeem myself. What news? The staff member narrowed his eyes. He wasn't willing to make a trip to the Senate building just because of Hong Kongquan's words. Here. Hong Kongquan pointed at the hot American news reprinted in the newspaper. The Americans want us to hand over the pink piggy. I might know how to find the pink piggy. Really? The staff member was interested. If Hong Kongquan really knew how to find the pink piggy, then it would be a great achievement. Wait, I'll ask my superiors. The staff member was about to call the Senate. Hong Kongquan shook his head. Call Prime Minister Tan. I'll only tell him about this. Tan Dongbang was only the acting Prime Minister at this time. The Senate had previously tried to impeach him but failed. According to the law, if the Senate wanted to impeach him again, they would need to go through more stringent procedures and would have no chance of success. Therefore, Speaker Long didn't choose to impeach him again. Instead, he chose to dissolve the cabinet and hold a new interim election. But before the interim election was held and a new prime minister was elected, Tan Dongbang would still be the acting prime minister. His cabinet would still be the acting cabinet and would only be a transitional government organization waiting for a new prime minister to be elected. So at this time, Tan Dongbang still had a lot of power. Of course, he was still inferior to the official prime minister. Speaker Long felt that Tan Dongbang's image was no longer worthy of being prime minister. He didn't want him to attend any national events because he didn't want others to see him embarrass the Wuxia Empire. But from a legal perspective, Tan Dongbang's position as acting prime minister was secure. Hong Kongquan insisted on seeing Tan Dongbang, so the staff member thought about it and chose to call the Senate first. But at this time, Speaker Long and Special Assistant Zhuang were nervously arranging the reception of the German Chancellor and the Director of the Federal Intelligence Agency, so they didn't have time to answer the phone. The staff member who was guarding Hong Kong only managed to make a call to a small operator in the Senate Secretariat before he stopped. The staff member saw that neither Speaker Long nor Special Assistant Zhuang had time to answer the phone, so he didn't want to spread such important news. He could only leave a message and ask Special Assistant Zhuang to call him when he had time. Then, according to Hong Kongquan's request, he called Prime Minister Tan of the cabinet. Tan Dongbang happened to be in his office, so he personally took the call after his secretary transferred the call. As soon as he heard the staff member say that Hong Kongquan had a way to find the pink piggy, Tan Dongbang immediately stood up. What? Is what he said true? What Director Hong said is absolutely true. The staff member's attitude towards Hong Kongquan was much more polite. What if Hong Kongquan suddenly made a comeback? Tan Dongbang thought about it and said suspiciously, if he can find it, then let him. Why me? I'm not the pink piggy. The employee relayed Tan Dongbang's words to Hong Kongquan. Hong Kongquan silently cursed Tan Dongbang for not knowing what was good for him, but he still said patiently, ask Prime Minister Tan to come over when he's free. I have something to say to him in person. Tan Dongbang originally didn't want to get involved in this mess, but when he thought of his current situation where his life was hanging by a thread, he chose to make a last attempt. What if he was a blind cat and ran into a dead mouse? It wasn't like this hadn't happened before. As Tan Dongbang thought about it, he packed his briefcase and had someone prepare a car to go to the place where Hong Kongquan was being held. As the acting prime minister, Tan Dongbang was the symbol of the head of state, so he still had a lot of authority. The staff member who was holding Hong Kongquan checked the relevant regulations and finally had no choice but to let Tan Dongbang in. When he arrived at the guest room, Tan Dongbang saw that Hong Kongquan was already waiting there. He sat down across from him and said calmly, Director Hong, you better have something to say. Otherwise don't waste our time. Hong Kongquan nodded. Prime Minister Tan, I only have one thing to say. As long as you support me in finding the pink piggy, you can officially become the Prime Minister from the acting position. What did you say? Tan Dongbang's expression instantly changed. Hong Kongquan, don't talk nonsense. His heart was pounding, but he hoped that Hong Kongquan would refute him and tell him that he had a way to continue being the Prime Minister. Hong Kongquan laughed when he saw Tan Dongbang's reaction. Prime Minister Tan, whether or not I'm talking nonsense depends on whether or not you give me this opportunity. Tan Dongbang's expression fluctuated for a long time before he finally made up his mind and asked Hong Kongquan, what opportunity do you want me to give you? Use your Prime Minister privilege to let me out first. Then give me the authorization to go to the Special Operations Forces and find the 27 people who participated in the cyber war that night to go to my Secret Service for questioning. Hong Kongquan's eyes were bloodthirsty and excited. This was what he had wanted to do that night, but because of Speaker Long's indecision, he had failed at the last step. However, he hadn't been wrong. The expert who had been giving him pointers really did have a way to turn things around. Tan Dongbang's Prime Minister privilege could indeed be used once. However, it was usually only used when he stepped down from office. It wouldn't be difficult to let Hong Kongquan out of here, and he didn't even need to use his Prime Minister privilege. However, it would be extremely difficult to find people from the Special Operations Forces to go to the Secret Service for questioning. He would probably need to use his Prime Minister privilege. Tan Dongbang's eyes flickered. The Prime Minister privilege can only be used once in a single term. Director Hong, this request of yours is a bit too much. Whether it's too much or not depends on the returns. If the returns are high, then what's all this? Hong Kongquan said proudly. He didn't seem at all like someone who was being detained. I still can't think of what this has to do with my election. In a few days, I won't even be the acting Prime Minister anymore, so I won't be able to help you. Tan Dongbang asked slyly. He was completely in a state where he wouldn't release the eagle until he saw the rabbit. Hong Kongquan laughed. Tan Dongbang was obviously attracted by his conditions and was still resisting stubbornly and with great difficulty. Prime Minister Tan, if you can handle this matter, you might be elected again. Hong Kongquan said very enthusiastically. Think about it. If I can find the pink piggy, you will be able to receive the support of the United States and Germany. It will be beneficial for the election. Tan Dongbang's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. But there seems to be opposition from the people in the Wuxia Empire? Currently, all the major social media platforms were controlled by the public's leading party, and the silent majority had suppressed their desire to speak up. However, there was no lack of unyielding people who had expressed opposition from the very beginning. It's normal to have opposition. It's abnormal to be completely in favor of it. Hong Kongquan understood very well. But as long as I find the pink piggy, and hand her over to the Americans and Germans, this lawsuit will be cancelled. We won't have to pay exorbitant compensation either, and we'll save the country and the military a lot of money. Everyone will thank us. With this kind of achievement, when the time comes, we can use it to promote it in the media. Don't you think your chances will be much better? It was the third watch and it was still the third watch today. Let's remind everyone of our recommendation votes and monthly votes. Let's persevere. Chapter 1058. I'm on a business trip in New York, and I've been stuck in traffic in Manhattan since 5 p.m. I estimate that I'll only be able to return to the hotel at 9:30 p.m., so I have no choice but to postpone the update. I'll be going to Boston tomorrow. In order to prevent everyone from waiting, I'll postpone the first update to 12 p.m., just like today. Moi, my dear friends, seeing that I haven't forgotten to update even though I'm on a business trip, please vote for me with your monthly and recommendation votes. Chapter 1059. Will it really happen? Tan Dong Bang was a bit doubtful. If I listen to the Americans' request and give them the pink piggy, will our citizens really thank me? And then vote for me? Were the citizens that easy to fool? Hong Kong Quan glared at Tan Dong Bang in exasperation. If it weren't for the fact that there were guards here, he really would have punched this man in the face. He really thought that the reason he was chosen last time was because his wife, Kai Song-in, stirred up a storm in the media. However, he couldn't tell him the truth about this matter, so he could only find some nonsensical reasons to fool Tan Dong Bang. Prime Minister Tan, have you ever heard of the saying, the people can do whatever they want but they can't be made to know? A crafty glint appeared in Hong Kong-chuan's eyes. Tan Dong Bang frowned and looked down at the headlines in front of him, so he missed the change in Hong Kong-chuan's expression. He nodded. Of course I know. You mean? Yes, what I mean is that the people follow blindly. They don't have the ability to think for themselves. They're like a bunch of fat deer with no intelligence. You don't have to rack your brains to think about how to get their support. What you need to do is to get support from the upper echelons, especially from foreign powers. Hong Kong Quan enthusiastically promoted the benefits of relying on a powerful force to Tan Dong Bang and promised, as long as you help me find the pink piggy, I can almost guarantee that you will be re-elected. When he whispered this into Tan Dong Bang's ear, Tan Dong Bang couldn't help but shiver with excitement. Are you serious? Can you guarantee it? What guarantee do you have? Tan Dong Bang's eyes shone with a feverish light. His pupils behind his crystal lenses had almost shrunk into tiny black dots, making the whites of his eyes appear to take up a lot more space than his black irises. Hong Kong Quan lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, then enunciated each word clearly. Guarantee? I can only say that if we fail, I will bear all the responsibility. Also, go ask your wife Kai Song-in to see if I'm trustworthy. Tan Dong Bang's expression wavered. Fine, I'll go back and ask her. Tan Dong Bang returned to the Prime Minister's official residence and immediately sought out Kai Song-in to ask about Hong Kong Quan. Song-in, Hong Kong Quan said he has a way. Do you believe him? Tan Dong Bang had thought he was going to lose for sure this time, but he hadn't expected things to take a turn for the better. It looked like he still had a chance to turn things around. However, this hope was too slim. Even he himself did not believe Hong Kong-chuan's words. But even if he didn't believe it, after careful consideration, he decided to give it a try. Because even if he did not succeed for him, it would be the same failure as now. He would not lose anything more. However, if he succeeded, he would really be able to turn over a new leaf. It was like a bet. If he lost, he wouldn't have to pay any price. But if he won, he would gain huge profits. Who would give up on such a gamble? Kai Song-in was still very impressed by Hong Kong-chuan's abilities. She even knew that Hong Kong Quan had a powerful force supporting him from behind. As for who it was, she didn't know. In any case, Hong Kong-chuan's suggestions had indeed solved her urgent problems the last few times she had been in trouble. Also, she had the same thought as Tan Dong Bang, which was that this opportunity was too good to pass up. Therefore, she felt that she could trust Hong Kong Quan just this once. Dong Bang, I want to ask you, if you are elected again, will you be able to learn from this experience? Kai Song-in was trying to convince Tan Dong Bang. She no longer had any trust in him. She was completely relying on power and profit to tie the two of them together. If Tan Dong Bang was elected Prime Minister again, she would continue to be his wife. If he couldn't be elected, then she would bid farewell to him. She would ask for a divorce. It had to be said that although Tan Dong Bang and Kai Song-in slept in the same bed but dreamed different dreams, their way of thinking was exactly the same. They were truly soulmates through and through. Of course I won't do anything to let you down again. Songyin, you don't know how ashamed I am. Every time I think about how I was tricked by an evil and shallow woman like Gu Yanran, I'm so ashamed that I can't even show my face. Also, I've learned from my mistakes. Your husband is not an idiot. Can't I learn from my mistakes? Tan Dongbang swore to Kai Songyin. If I make such a mistake again, then I will let Songyin down and not be elected prime minister. Kai Songyin rolled her eyes at him. You don't have to swear to me. It's fine as long as you have your own plans. Tell Hong Kongquan that we can help him, but he must find the pink piggy before the election and hand it over to the Americans. At the same time, he must guarantee that you will be successfully elected. Tan Dongbang chuckled. That's what he said anyway. Actually, I also want to know how he will turn the tables on me. Tan Dongbang wasn't the only one curious. Even Kai Songyin was curious. After the two of them discussed it, Tan Dongbang ignored his aide's dissuasion and insisted on doing things his own way. He used the highest executive order to release Hong Kongquan from custody and restore his position as director of the Secret Service. Then he used his privileges as prime minister to allow him to go to the Special Operations Forces and request the transfer of those 27 personnel to the Secret Service to assist in the investigation. Hong Kongquan left the place where he was being held and immediately returned to the Secret Service. He found Deputy Director Feng of the Secret Service and showed him the Prime Minister's special authorization. Old Feng, make a trip to the Special Operations Forces and summon the 27 members of the Special Operations Forces who have already been exposed to the Secret Service to assist in the investigation. According to procedure, if something goes wrong within the Special Operations Forces, the Secret Service will handle it. This was indeed one of the powers granted to the Secret Service. Deputy Director Feng had already been investigating this matter, so he didn't suspect anything. He immediately said, "Yes, Director Hong. I'll go to the Special Operations Forces to summon the personnel." He then asked, "Director Hong, are you all right?" Hong Kongquan waved his hand. "I'm fine to begin with. It's not the first time that the Special Operations Forces have disliked us, but Hua Xiaoheng is still too young to take me down. Don't worry, they don't have any evidence. They want to erase all my years of contributions based on hearsay and speculation. I'm not the only one who won't accept it. The Secret Service won't accept it either." Deputy Director Feng sighed in relief. "We were also very worried about you. Everyone is very happy to know that you're all right." "Thank you." Hong Kongquan smiled very kindly. "I'll treat everyone to a meal at Fuline Restaurant after work." Deputy Director Feng grinned. "I'd better get back to work first." Hong Kongquan stopped him again. "Take Prime Minister Tan's special authorization and go to the Special Operations Forces to summon those 27 people back to assist in the investigation. There's no need to say that I'm already back. We need to catch them off guard." Deputy Director Feng laughed. "Director Hong, you're really going to give them a fright." It had to be said that Hong Kongquan's return to the Secret Service would be a huge boost of morale for everyone in the Secret Service. If the head of the Special Operations Forces had really managed to bring down the director of the Secret Service, then the entire Secret Service would be unable to raise their heads in front of the Special Operations Forces in the future. Fortunately, their director was so powerful that he was able to return from the Senate's detention center without any problems. At the same time, Song Jining suddenly called Hua Xiaoheng excitedly. "Xiaoheng, I've already been observing for 2 days. Our surveillance cameras at the Institute of High Energy Physics have discovered that the strange magnetic field has appeared again in Sea City where Gu Nianji had her car accident. I need to go to Sea City immediately for an on-site inspection." This was the first time Song Jining had encountered such a situation since she had regained consciousness, and it was also closely related to their secret experiment from 17 years ago. The opportunity was fleeting and she absolutely could not give it up. For the past 7 years, the Institute of High Energy Physics had been conducting field research on this magnetic field, and the Special Operations Forces had been providing special security. Hua Xiaoheng immediately decided to let Song Jining bring the equipment and staff with him on the military plane to Sea City immediately. He also wanted to know what would happen in that place, and whether the appearance of this magnetic field would be related to Gu Nianji. Deputy Director Feng brought the staff of the Secret Service to the Special Operations Forces with the Prime Minister's special authorization to request that the 27 people be brought back to the Secret Service to assist in the investigation. Hua Xiaoheng was on the military plane flying to Sea City. Phone calls were temporarily unavailable on the plane, so after the operator left a message for Hua Xiaoheng, he informed the current head of the military base, Zhou Qiyuan. Although Zhou Qiyuan was reluctant, He couldn't refuse the Prime Minister's special authorization. Moreover, the United States did indeed have evidence against the 27 staff members, so according to procedure, the Secret Service should indeed investigate. Zhou Qiyuan didn't know that Hong Kongquan had already been released. After he called General Ji for instructions, he agreed to Deputy Director Feng's request and allowed the 27 staff members to follow Deputy Director Feng to the Secret Service to assist in the investigation. They all thought that it was only a job requirement, and that they were assisting in the investigation according to procedure. Even Deputy Director Feng of the Secret Service thought so. However, as soon as the 27 staff members arrived at the Secret Service, Hong Kongquan immediately ordered all of them to be taken to the execution room and detained separately. He also sealed off all communication channels for the Secret Service and increased the security level to the highest level. At this time, Gunyanji had just changed into a professional suit and arrived at the Senate. She was about to go with Speaker Long to the airport to greet the members of the Chinese delegation, including the German Chancellor and Major General Reinitz of the Federal Intelligence Agency. This was the first update. It was still the third update. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. Monthly votes at 7 p.m. 4,200 plus updates, and the third update at 9 p.m. P.S. If there are any changes to the update time in the future, I will notify you on Weibo. This time I will no longer be posting individual chapters. Because I recently learned that these free individual chapters have an impact on the number of chapters available through the channel. My Weibo, Writers Cambrian. Chapter 1060. The Secret Service's execution room occupied the entire third basement floor of the Secret Service's operations building. On the surface, it looked no different from any other room, but once all the lights were turned off, there were endless possibilities. Hong Kongquan was wearing a full Secret Service uniform, special sunglasses and tall leather boots. He brought his trusted subordinates to the execution room floor. In each of the 27 small execution rooms, there was a member of the Special Operations Forces locked up. They were all people whose real names and photos had been revealed in the U.S. Department of Justice's indictment. Hong Kongquan sat in the monitoring room and spoke to the Special Operations Forces members through the microphone. My colleagues from the Special Operations Forces, I am very sorry that you have experienced this undeserved disaster. I know it was not your fault, but because of your chief's mistake, your system was breached and your data was obtained by the U.S. Department of Justice to be used against you. The Special Operations Forces members sitting in the execution room listened to him quietly without any expression on their faces. Hong Kongquan was a little annoyed. He frowned and said, "The impact of this incident is extremely bad. I don't need to say anything this time. You all know the result. That is, you will definitely be discharged from the military." At this time, the Special Operations Forces members began to move. Some of them moved their necks uneasily, while others twisted their legs tightly. Although there was no change in expression on their faces, some subtle movements showed the change in their emotions. Hong Kongquan breathed a sigh of relief. He had thought that these Special Operations Forces members were all made of steel and would not be moved by him, but I know that all of you are smart and capable soldiers. Even if you are discharged and have to take the blame for someone else, you will not back down. Hong Kongquan changed the topic and began to praise the members of the Special Operations Forces. That's why I'm so heartbroken. You don't deserve to suffer such a fate. You could have had a bright future ahead of you. You shouldn't have ruined your futures for a notorious hacker who does whatever he wants. As soon as Hong Kongquan finished speaking, he noticed that the pulse and heartbeat of these Special Operations Forces members had suddenly accelerated. Yes, the chairs in the execution room were large instruments with lie detection functions. These Special Operations Forces members were sitting on the chairs. Even if they turned their bodies slightly, these chairs could detect changes in their blood pressure, pulse and heartbeat. As for the lie detector, it used the changes in the human body's basic data to test the truth. Hong Kongquan's pupils suddenly shrank. These people really knew who the pink piggy was. Hong Kongquan's palms began to sweat when he thought about the message that person had sent him. His gamble had indeed succeeded. Only by finding the pink piggy and handing it over would the other party do their best to help him eliminate Hua Xiaoheng. As long as Hua Xiaoheng was physically eliminated, then the entire Huaxia Empire's intelligence agency would be under his control. He would never betray the interests of the country. And what was the pink piggy? How could a hacker be considered a national interest? From what Hong Kongquan knew, he had never thought that handing over the pink piggy was a big deal. If a civilian hacker could see the big picture and know how much trouble she had caused for the country, she should have turned herself in. instead of waiting for the country to clean up the mess for her. Hong Kongquan had never been kind to people who didn't know what was good for them. Thinking that the pink piggy was at his fingertips, Hong Kongquan became excited. My colleagues from the Special Operations Forces, since you all know who the pink piggy is, then I won't say more. Write down her real name, identity, occupation, home address, and phone number. Write down as much as you know. Once you're done, you can leave the Secret Service. I promise you that if you are discharged, the doors of the Secret Service will be open to you. As long as you come, I will at least fight for the position of director for each of you. The Special Operations Forces was part of the military, and the members were all regular soldiers. The Secret Service was part of the cabinet, and the members were all ordinary citizens. Of course, there were also many retired soldiers. For example, Hong Kongquan himself was a retired soldier. His move of combining kindness with severity and disintegration was very impressive. His confidants were very envious when they heard this. Unfortunately, they didn't know who the pink piggy was. Otherwise, they would also be able to become directors. They looked at the 27 small screens in the monitoring room with red eyes, waiting for the members of the Special Operations Forces to write down the whereabouts of the pink piggy. However, they waited for a full 30 minutes, and the 27 members of the Special Operations Forces were still sitting motionlessly in their chairs. Not a single one of them moved. Moreover, their heartbeats and pulses were stable, as if they had made a unanimous decision. Each of them sat in the execution room with a normal expression, and no one said a word. The 27 execution rooms were as quiet as an ancient wasteland. Even the sound of human breathing could not be heard. Hong Kongquan's expression suddenly became very ugly. Not a single one of them said anything. Boss, these people really don't know what's good for them. Hong Kongquan's confidants began to point at the screen. If I knew who that person was, I would definitely write it down immediately. Exactly. If we knew, we would also ask the boss to make us directors. Everyone laughed happily as if they were already directors. Hong Kongquan's heart skipped a beat. He looked at these people and asked, "You guys want to be directors too?" Boss, we were just joking. Boss, are you for real? Is there room for negotiation? The eyes of the people around Hong Kongquan almost turned green. They could not hide the greed in their eyes. Hong Kongquan smiled without saying a word and waited for another 30 minutes. After an hour, none of these people moved and no one made a sound. Hong Kongquan's first plan had failed, so he thought of another. He said into the microphone, "Are you going to talk or not? Actually, some of you have already confessed to me. If you don't want to lose everything, just say it. Someone has already said it anyway." At this time, one of the Special Operations Forces staff in the execution room spoke. "Is it Director Hong? If someone has already confessed, can you let me go back? You already know who it is anyway, so why are you still locking me up?" "Director Hong? Someone confessed? That's great. Then let me go. This has nothing to do with me anyway. I don't know who the pink piggy is. Aren't you afraid of making a mistake by locking me up like this? Congratulations, Director Hong, for successfully completing the political mission that the United States assigned to you. Can you let me go now? Anyway, I really don't know who the pink piggy is. You don't have to waste your energy on me." One after another, the same mocking voices of the Special Operations Forces staff could be heard coming from the microphones in the 27 execution rooms. Hong Kongquan's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. He did not expect these Special Operations Forces staff to be so quick-witted. They practically wanted to start a dye factory just because he gave them some color. He was just trying to trick them. He did not expect that not only would he not succeed, but they would also use this as an excuse to immediately ask him to let him go. This was the second update, and the monthly tickets had been delivered for 4,200 plus updates. It was still the third update today. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. 9 p.m. the third update. P.S. If there are any changes to the update time in the future, I will notify you on Weibo. This time I will not be posting any more chapters. Because I just recently found out that these free chapters have an impact on the number of chapters on the channel. My Weibo, Writer Cambrian. Chapter 1061. Hong Kongquan's confidants looked at each other and thought to themselves that their boss had overreached himself. How could he be in a good mood after being ridiculed by the staff of the Special Operations Forces? Hong Kongquan took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a deep drag. He pointed at the screen and said, "You guys go. I don't care what you do, but whoever can pry open their mouths, I will give you the position of director." The director was a level higher than the director. Hong Kongquan's confidant's eyes all lit up. Boss, are you for real? There's no need for director. The position of director is fine. Seeing his subordinates express their loyalty, Hong Kongquan finally felt like he had regained some of his dignity after being trampled on by the Special Operations Forces. Alright, it's up to you guys now. Hong Kongquan said as he walked out of the surveillance room on the execution room floor and headed upstairs. Returning to his office in the Secret Services Operations Building, Hong Kongquan was still holding his cigarette and looking out the window with his arms crossed. He knew that he didn't have much time left. He might not even have a day. Soon, Hua Xiaoheng, General Ji, and Speaker Long would all find out that something had happened to the Special Operations Forces. Tan Dongbang was already fearless. By then, the three forces would join forces to kill him, and if he still couldn't find out who the pink piggy was, his life would be over. Hong Kongquan stood in front of the window in a daze, but not long after, he suddenly heard his personal phone ring. He took it out and saw that it was the invalid number. His previously hopeless heart was once again filled with hope. He quickly swiped it open and picked it up. Hello, I need your help now. Hong Kongquan's voice was trembling with excitement. It was still that cold, emotionless, machine-like voice on the other end. I've tried my best to help you. You only have 24 hours at most. Can you find the whereabouts of the pink piggy within 24 hours? Hong Kongquan knew that this voice must have been modified with a device, so he didn't feel cold. Instead, he felt very warm, especially when he was in despair. I will try my best. Hong Kongquan promised the person. But if you can't find it, I hope that you can help my family leave this place. The person was silent for a while before saying, I will contact you in 24 hours. He then said, you were taken away by the Senate to be detained, so I couldn't call you, so I used another method to contact you. Did you see it? If he hadn't seen it, he wouldn't have done what he did today. Hong Kongquan nodded. I saw it. I'm just giving it my all. If I don't succeed, I'll die trying. The man praised him. I've worked with you for so many years. Although we haven't talked much, I know you're a responsible person. Don't worry, I won't let anyone who has worked with me die in vain. By saying that, the man was planning to protect Hong Kongquan's life no matter what the outcome was. This was an unexpected surprise. Now that Hong Kongquan no longer had anything to worry about, he was even more daring to think and act. After the man hung up, Hong Kongquan immediately returned to the surveillance room on the execution floor. In the surveillance room, all 27 screens were pitch black. He narrowed his eyes, walked to the door of an execution room and listened carefully. From time to time, there would be muffled cries of pain. There was also the sound of punches, kicks, and electric batons mixed together. Although it was very soft, Hong Kong could hear it all clearly. The Secret Service had their own way of dealing with people. After this round of torture, these people did not have any visible wounds on the outside, but the inside of their bodies had suffered greatly. Shortly after the military plane took off, Hua Xiaoheng processed a few documents. When he wanted to send them back, he found that the plane's network was not working, so he asked the orderly to ask the flight crew. The flight crew came over to apologize, sweating profusely. Chief, the plane's communication system had a problem after takeoff. We're in the middle of emergency repairs. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. Song Jining, who was sitting next to him, quickly said, Do you have something important to contact someone about? Do you want to use my phone? Hua Xiaoheng also had his own phone. He originally wanted to use the network, but now it seemed that he could only use his phone to send instructions. He did not take Song Jining's phone but took out his own phone. Thank you, Miss Song, but I can use my own phone. But when he took out his phone, he saw that the flight crew was still standing in front of him, looking at him. Hua Xiaoheng raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Don't tell me that I can't even use my phone. Chief, the real problem is that after the plane flew to high altitude, we discovered serious electromagnetic interference. Not only was the plane's communication system disrupted, but even the phone signal seemed to be blocked. Hua Xiaoheng stood up suddenly. What did you say? Electromagnetic interference. Take me to have a look. He was the most famous fighter pilot in the Huaxia Empire, so this kind of military aircraft was nothing to him. He had studied them systematically. When a plane encountered electromagnetic interference at high altitudes, the problem could be big or small. From a small point of view, military aircraft did not need to communicate with the ground as frequently as civilian aircraft. The impact of electromagnetic interference on military aircraft was not as great as that of civilian aircraft. But from a big point of view, no matter what plane it was, the possibility of the plane crashing and people dying would be infinitely increased under the circumstances of strong electromagnetic interference. As soon as Song Jining heard electromagnetic interference, she immediately stood up. Xiaoheng, I'll go with you. She was a high-energy physicist and was an expert in electromagnetic interference. Hua Xiaoheng looked at her and suddenly smiled. That's good too. The person who released the electromagnetic interference definitely didn't expect that there was an electromagnetic expert on my plane. Take your equipment and follow me. Song Jining turned around, carried her small briefcase and followed Hua Xiaoheng to the cockpit. In the cockpit, the pilot, co-pilot and several flight crew were sweating profusely as they dealt with the abnormal situation of the plane. Only then did Hua Xiaoheng realize that because the electromagnetic interference was getting stronger, their plane had almost lost its sense of direction. In other words, they did not know where they were flying now. Chief, we're working hard. The pilot and co-pilot in the cockpit looked as if they were facing death with equanimity. Hua Xiaoheng quickly calmed down and raised his hand to the pilot. You come down, I'll try. Then he turned to look at Song Jining. Miss Song, how long will it take you to determine the source and frequency of the electromagnetic interference, and to shield and remove it? Song Jining saw that Hua Xiaoheng was not in a hurry and calmed down. She opened her briefcase and took out an instrument. This was originally an instrument to be brought to Sea City to measure the strange magnetic field. She did not expect it to come in handy now. You take the helm, I'll escort you. Song Jining smiled as she connected the power to the instrument. Her hands nimbly tapped on the keyboard and issued instructions one by one. It was the third watch. It was still the third watch today. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes and monthly votes. P.S. In the future, if there is a change in the update time, the notice will not be sent at the right time. The place where it should be sent is always censored and deleted by the right time, so I won't say it again. If you see that it is not updated on time, go to the book review and comments section to take a look. There should be a reminder. P.S. I actually wanted to write the same rhythm as the American TV series, 24. It seems that I was thinking too much. I laughed until I cried haha. My dear friends are so anxious. My moderator Little Meow has shown me everyone's questions. Most of them are about the plot unfolding later. A small part is that I didn't express it clearly, so I apologize to everyone. If you want to blame something, blame it on me for not having enough time recently and not being able to update more. If 4 or 5 chapters were posted together, the plot would be more complete. My dear friends, please forgive me. My time is limited, so I can only write up to here now. Chapter 1062. The pilot and flight crew on the military plane watched nervously as Song Jining performed an electromagnetic frequency search. They couldn't help but ask, Director Song, can you determine where the source of the interference is coming from? For a plane, when it was flying, it was constantly exposed to different levels of electromagnetic interference. Therefore, in the beginning they really didn't realize that the situation was so serious. They just treated it as a daily occurrence and thought that they could rely on their own power to filter and eliminate it. They didn't expect that the electromagnetic interference they encountered would become more and more serious as the plane flew higher and higher. When they realized that this time the electromagnetic interference was no longer something they could eliminate and were about to report to Hua Xiaoheng had already taken the initiative to ask them about the network connection. Song Jining focused on the data that appeared on her screen and explained to them as if she was teaching a student. Generally speaking, there are 2 main sources of electromagnetic interference: natural interference and man-made interference. Electrical noise from the atmosphere or cosmic noise from outer space are all natural interference. They are the basic components of the electromagnetic environment of the blue planet, but they can also cause interference to radio communications. And man-made interference, as the name implies, is electromagnetic interference generated by artificial devices. However, man-made interference can be divided into passive and active interference. Passive interference is the small amount of electromagnetic interference that some electronic devices carry when performing their own functions. For example, high-voltage wires or household appliances can release a small amount of electromagnetic interference. Active man-made interference is some devices that are specially used to generate electromagnetic radiation. For a plane, the worst electromagnetic interference is, of course, active man-made interference. The pilot and the flight crew gasped. Active human interference? For this plane? Is that possible? The military plane that Hua Xiaoheng was riding on was an E-01 command plane. It was a plane that combined ground surveillance, air command and combat control functions. It was like a flying command fortress and also had the ability to carry and launch intercontinental missiles and small nuclear bombs. How could such a command plane not have strong anti-radiation and anti-interference capabilities? Of course, it was only the first generation of command planes developed by the Wuxia Empire. Its technology was not as mature as other military planes. Its anti-interference capabilities had not been tested in actual combat, so it was possible for there to be mistakes. Song Jining nodded and said calmly, "Active man-made interference is only the worst in theory. As far as I know, there is no device that can interfere with an aircraft at an altitude of 10,000 meters. Besides, this is a military aircraft. I just tested it. This aircraft has an excellent anti-interference coating. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have suffered such serious electromagnetic interference. But the fact was that it did suffer from serious electromagnetic interference, so serious that it had almost lost its direction. This was the worst nightmare for an airplane. Not only did it mean that they might not reach their destination, but it also meant that they might collide with another plane at any time because they might deviate from the other plane's route." Song Jining looked up at He Xiaoheng and saw that he was focused on steering with both hands. He was looking at the rolling snow-white clouds in front of them and the impenetrable blue sky. Right now, he was completely relying on his intuition and the direction of the sun to determine his position. Just as Song Jining raised her head, she suddenly saw a shiny dot approaching them from afar. It was rushing towards their plane. "Be careful. A plane is coming." Everyone in the cockpit had their hearts in their throats. Everyone watched as the plane flew towards them in a frenzy. At the same time, the pilot of the opposite plane was almost about to faint. How could there be an oncoming plane on my flight path? He used the radio to call many times, but the other party didn't answer. In his despair, he almost wanted to report to the ground that he had been attacked by a crazy plane. At that moment, the huge silver-white plane that looked like a proud white swan suddenly raised its proud head and abruptly pulled up. The clouds flew past quickly, and the blue sky seemed to be close at hand. The elegant and beautiful body of the white swan shot up almost vertically into the sky in front of the civil aviation plane, bringing with it a huge whirlpool of clouds and a roar of sonic booms. This was the first time the E-01 command plane had achieved supersonic flight. Thunderous applause and cheers came from the cockpit from the pilots and flight attendants. They wanted nothing more than to drown out the sonic booms caused by the supersonic flight. In the huge whirlpool formed by the clouds, the white swan spread its wings and flew over the civil aviation plane. Crisis averted. Crisis averted. The captain of the civil aviation plane was almost paralyzed in the pilot's seat as he sent a reassuring message to the passengers on the plane. The passengers, who had been so tense that they were about to break, suddenly burst into cheers. After the cheers, everyone slumped in their seats and couldn't wait to tell their families about the dangerous situation they had just encountered. When the captain of the civil aviation plane looked out the window, he only saw a silvery white body projection like a white swan. The plane had disappeared without a trace. He calmed down and reported the dangerous situation he had encountered today to the ground control panel. He said calmly, "This plane didn't show up on the radar at all. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have known that such a plane would appear on the route. Over." At that moment, He Xiaoheng released the handbrake and began to check the various data of the plane. He tried his best to bring the plane back to the correct route as soon as possible. Song Jining was dumbfounded by the scene just now. At the last moment, she had an impulse to rush up and hug her son and use her body to protect him from all disasters and dangers. But her son was more powerful and capable than she had imagined. At the last moment, he tried his best to pull the plane up to avoid the two planes colliding and the misfortune of the plane being destroyed. Song Jining restrained herself and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with her hand. She sped up the instructions on her hands. She said with a thick nasal voice, "The equipment is incomplete, so I can't clear and shield it. I can only carry out anti-interference, which can also counteract the other party's electromagnetic interference. Moreover, anti-interference could not only counteract the other party's electromagnetic interference, but it could even cause chaos and damage to the other party's electromagnetic equipment." He Xiaoheng didn't turn his head. He just nodded. "Ms. Song, anti-interference as soon as possible. I'm worried that more planes will appear on this route." He had already realized that this was another encirclement against him. Someone wanted his life but didn't dare to do it. Therefore they used superb technical means to kill him without anyone knowing. "No problem. I've already determined their electromagnetic frequency. Activate anti-interference immediately," Song Jining said hatefully. They dared to kill her son? Did they want to die? Song Jining adjusted the power of her instrument to the maximum and released the same frequency, but the electromagnetic signal was 10,000 times more powerful. This frequency would only interfere with the instrument that released electromagnetic interference to them and wouldn't affect other aircraft. As time passed, everyone held their breath. Only the noise of various instruments could be heard in the cockpit. Soon, Hua Xiaoheng realized that Song Jinning's method was working. Because his earphones gradually began to emit an electromagnetic sound, which meant that their contact with the ground control was being restored. Also, the radio communication and network were gradually being restored. Try the signal and contact the ground control, Hua Xiaoheng ordered calmly. Determine the direction and see where we are. He looked at his watch. It was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At this time, a full 4 hours had passed since they took off. This meant that they had been hovering in the air for almost 4 hours, and there was not enough oil in the plane. But as long as the contact with the ground was restored, this wouldn't be a problem. Hua Xiaoheng returned the plane to the pilot and asked him to contact the military. After confirming the direction, he called an air refueling plane over to refuel. Hong Kongquan sat in the surveillance room on the execution floor of the Secret Service and looked at the time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when he asked Deputy Minister Feng to invite the members of the Special Operations Forces. The interrogation had lasted for 2 hours, and then the execution room was dark. Another 2 hours had passed, and it was almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It should be about time. Hong Kongquan thought to himself. He wanted to force the whereabouts of the pink piggy from these people, not their lives. No matter what, if some of these people really died, no matter how much credit he had, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. The operation is over. You can come out now, Hong Kongquan said calmly into the microphone, then turned on the lights of the execution room. The surveillance was restored, and Hong Kongquan looked at the execution rooms one by one, admiring the masterpiece of his subordinates. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he couldn't help but be furious when he saw the situation in the execution room. Didn't they say that there wouldn't be any external injuries? Why were these members of the Special Operations Forces all bruised and swollen, and covered in blood? In the 27 execution rooms, without exception, the wounds of the members of the Special Operations Forces were clearly visible on their faces and bodies. It was as if the words, "I was tortured by the Secret Service," were written all over their faces. Hong Kongquan was so angry that his nostrils flared, and his face kept twitching. They were all a bunch of useless people. They didn't even know how to fight or teach people a lesson. Hong Kongquan angrily rushed to the execution room closest to him, kicked the door open and yelled, "What are you doing? What did I teach you normally?" His subordinates sat on the chairs in the execution room and looked at him without moving. The smiles on their faces were stiff and strange. Hong Kongquan was shocked, and he suddenly remembered that the 27 execution rooms he had seen on the screen of the execution room seemed to all look like this. His subordinates were all sitting on the chairs, but the members of the Special Operations Forces were all lying on the floor, in all sorts of positions. Oh no! Hong Kongquan knew that something was wrong and was about to retreat immediately. However, the member of the Special Operations Forces who was lying on the floor covered in blood suddenly jumped up and pounced on Hong Kongquan. Hong Kongquan hurriedly dodged to the side, but the member of the Special Operations Forces had only made a feint. While Hong Kongquan was dodging, the member of the Special Operations Forces had already rushed to the door. In a moment of desperation, Hong Kongquan took out his gun and shot at the man's back. However, after the man jumped out of the door, he quickly rolled on the ground twice and successfully avoided the bullets that were shot at him from behind. Then he pressed the alarm on the floor of the execution room. The siren immediately sounded throughout the entire building of the Secret Service. Even the deputy ministers were alerted. This was the first night watch. It was still the third night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. The monthly votes were 4,500 plus updates at 7 p.m., and the third night watch at 9 p.m. Updates should resume at the normal time tomorrow. P.S. I've been warned by the editor again. More than a dozen chapters have been blocked and are currently being edited. Hopefully the block will be lifted soon. Chapter 1063. What's going on? Could it be an invasion? Are you kidding me? We are the Secret Service of the capital. If the enemy has invaded the Secret Service, I think our country is going to be destroyed. Although everyone was complaining, they still followed the procedure of the alarm and picked up their weapons. They went to their assigned positions and prepared to deal with the crisis. The crisis action team that had been set up beforehand put on bulletproof vests, carried their guns and ran downstairs to the execution room where the alarm was ringing. Deputy Minister Feng ran at the front with his men. His eyelids had been twitching all morning. His intuition told him that something bad was going to happen today, and it did. He muttered to himself as he quickly ran to the execution room on the 3rd floor underground. Stop. Who's there? He rushed out of the elevator and looked up to see Hong Kongquan rushing over with a gun. Old Hong, what's going on? Deputy Minister Feng asked, thinking that Hong Kongquan had found the target. Hong Kongquan pointed behind him and said, "Over there." Then he rushed into the elevator alone. Deputy Minister Feng was speechless. The men he had brought with him looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. In the corridor, the alarm was still ringing, and the door of the execution room was open. Hong Kongquan seemed to be pointing at this door just now. Deputy Minister Feng made a gesture and said, "Cover me." He crouched down, held his gun, and walked towards the execution room step by step. Halfway there, a man suddenly rushed out of a door and threw himself behind Deputy Minister Feng. He strangled him with one hand and removed his gun with the other. He warned, "Make them put down their guns. If anyone dares to move, I will break your neck." The man's hands were covered in blood. Deputy Minister Feng was disgusted and uncomfortable by the smell of blood, but he remembered that he was the Deputy Minister of the Secret Service. Even if he lost, he wouldn't back down. He said sternly, "Kill me if you have the guts. Don't even think about forcing me to speak for you." The man was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "So it's Deputy Minister Feng. You're really something. You colluded with that bastard Hong Kongquan and tricked 27 of us into being tortured by the Secret Service? Do you really think that the Special Operations Forces trained US for so many years was for nothing?" Deputy Minister Feng was shocked and said hoarsely, "What did you say? What torture? Was this something the Secret Service would do to their own people?" Deputy Minister Feng had always thought that Hong Kongquan had asked him to bring these 27 people back to assist in the investigation. "Who are you? Are you really the Special Operations Forces member who came with me today?" Deputy Minister Feng composed himself and began to reason with him. "You have to control yourself. Don't make a bigger mistake. I'd rather make a mistake than be beaten to death by you and have to trouble Wuxia to avenge me." The man picked up the gun and pointed it at Deputy Minister Feng's head. "I'll count to 3. Tell your people to put down their guns. If you don't, you can forget about holding a gun in the future. I'll shoot the hand that's holding the gun." The crisis action team that Deputy Minister Feng had brought with him only consisted of 10 people. Although everyone was armed with heavy weapons, they did not necessarily know how to shoot. Even if they did, the shots might not be accurate. They were incomparable to the Special Operations Forces soldiers who had undergone Huoxiaoheng's hellish training. Seeing the murderous man pointing a gun at the back of Deputy Minister Feng's head, most of the members of the crisis action team felt their legs turn to jelly. A few of them were veterans and could still support themselves. They did not dare to relax for even a moment. When Deputy Minister Feng heard the man's words, he could not help but smile bitterly. No wonder Huoxiaoheng was able to hold such a high position at such a young age. He was really not someone they could compare to. Not only did one have to be capable to hold a high position, but more importantly, one had to be able to train a group of capable and loyal subordinates. Otherwise, they would not be able to carry out their work. One could become a hero by fighting alone, but they would never be able to become an outstanding leader. Only by uniting a group of capable subordinates and being able to command them with ease could they truly be trusted. Countless thoughts flashed through Deputy Minister Feng's mind in an instant. Finally he said, "Put down your guns." He was speaking to his own people. Deputy Minister Feng. A few veterans from the crisis action team of the Secret Service shouted and refused to put down their weapons. The other members threw down their guns immediately. 1, 2. Before the man could count to 3, the other veterans finally threw down their guns as well. It was not that they were timid, but the murderous aura of this man was too strong. He was pointing a gun at the back of Deputy Minister Feng's head, and he looked like he was really going to kill someone. The man from the Special Operations Forces saw that they had thrown down their guns, so he did not continue to make things difficult for them. However, he still pointed the gun at Deputy Minister Feng's head and said to the others, "Go open the doors of those execution rooms and release my 26 brothers." Deputy Minister Feng also wanted to know if this man was telling the truth, so he ordered, "Go open the doors." The members of the crisis action team of the Secret Service silently went to open the doors of the execution rooms. This floor was full of execution rooms. There were hundreds of small rooms that were 3 square meters in size. It had been a long time since anyone had been locked up here. Today there were more than 20 execution rooms filled with people. The doors of the execution rooms opened and everyone was shocked. In each of the execution rooms, there was a person with a bloody nose and a swollen face. There was also a person sitting in a chair with a stiff smile. They recognized that the person sitting in the chair with a stiff smile were all their colleagues from the Secret Service. So those who were covered in blood should be from the Special Operations Forces. When the people from the Special Operations Forces saw the doors of the execution rooms finally open, they stood up one by one and walked out of the room silently. They were all tall, burly and strong. When they looked at people, their gazes seemed to be filled with knives and poison. No one restrained their murderous aura. As soon as they saw the guns on the ground, someone quickly rushed over to pick them up. Others worked together to arrest all the members of the crisis action team of the Secret Service who had opened the doors for them. No one said a word, but they had a tacit understanding, and their cooperation was seamless. Deputy Minister Feng's eyes were red as he watched. He murmured, "Wuxiaoheng, Wuxiaoheng. King kept secrets. Next time I will send people to you for special training. If you dare to keep secrets, I will go to General Ji and complain about you." When these people heard Deputy Minister Feng mention Wuxiaoheng, they looked at each other but did not let down their guard. "Deputy Minister Feng, sorry. This matter is not over yet." A member of the Special Operations Forces pointed a gun at them. "We want to report this to the chief and find out what crime we have committed to be treated like this by the Secret Service. Torturing your own comrades. Deputy Minister Feng, your Chief Hong is really a hero to the Americans. And you, Deputy Minister Feng, you helped the evildoer and tricked us into joining the Secret Service. We will not forgive you." Although the main job of these 27 personnel from the Special Operations Forces was to do data analysis and computer monitoring, they were all people who specialized in computers. However, under Wuxiaoheng's special training, their combat abilities were off the charts, and each of them could fight 100 enemies alone. How could Hong Kongquan's trusted subordinates be a match for them? They wanted to fight in the execution room after the lights were off, but they were countered by the Special Operations Forces members. They punched themselves repeatedly, and they even used special electric batons to electrocute themselves until they almost fainted. These Special Operations Forces members did not stupidly show that they had the upper hand. They also, symbolically, punched themselves a few times in the dark, causing some blood to come out. In short, from the outside, they looked much worse than Hong Kongquan's trusted subordinates who were injured on the inside. An hour later, Prime Minister Tan and General Ji both received news that the Secret Service had tricked the 27 Special Operations Forces members wanted by the United States into joining the Secret Service for torture, provoking these people into a mutiny. They had already wiped out the Secret Service, taken several deputy ministers hostage, and demanded an explanation from the cabinet. This was the second update, and the monthly tickets had been delivered at 4,500 plus updates. It was still the third update. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. It was 9 p.m. the third update. Updates should resume at the normal time tomorrow. P.S. I am currently revising all the block chapters, and they will be released after the editor has reviewed them. Some of the plots may have major changes. I will list all the rewritten chapters, and there are a total of 19 chapters. Chapter 1064. What the F***ck did you say? I'm old and deaf, so I couldn't hear what you just said. If you F***king say mutiny one more time, I'll shoot you. General Ji roared angrily as soon as he heard what Tan Dongbang had said on the phone. Tan Dongbang trembled in fear and almost threw the landline phone in his hand. After a while, he calmed down and held the receiver a foot away from him. He put it on speakerphone and said into the phone, "General Ji, I'm not making this up. Wuxiaoheng's 27 soldiers have occupied our Secret Service building. I've already ordered the police headquarters to mobilize all the police forces to encircle and suppress them. How dare you?" General Ji's voice suddenly darkened. "If you dare to send police forces to encircle and suppress my soldiers, I'll destroy you." "General Ji, you can't do this. We're a legal society, so we have to abide by the law." Tan Dongbang was already impatient with General Ji's attitude. "The truth is that your soldiers are unreasonable. Not only did they refuse to cooperate with the investigation, but they also knowingly broke the law and occupied the Secret Service. These kinds of people should be handed over to the Americans to teach them how to behave." Bush**T. General Ji wasn't actually a sharp-tongued person, so he was obviously no match for someone like Tan Dongbang in a verbal argument. He was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. Unreasonable? You've already tortured them, so how are they supposed to be reasonable? When Hua Xiaoheng trained the members of the Special Operations Forces, he always taught them not to give up on their lives until the very last moment. So in order to survive, they would do everything they could. One Special Operations Forces member could open up an underground transportation channel in Eastern Europe. Two Special Operations Forces members could incite two political parties in a Western European country to fight to the death. Four Special Operations Forces members already controlled the economic lifeline of a South American country. And this time, the 27 Special Operations Forces members the Secret Service had provoked were the elite Special Operations Forces members under Hua Xiaoheng's command. They were both mentally and physically strong. This was really an old man looking for arsenic to eat. He didn't want to live anymore. So what was occupying a Secret Service building? If this had happened in another small country, 27 Special Operations Forces members would have easily destroyed the country. General Ji knew very well that with the combat power of the Special Operations Forces, it would be a piece of cake for them to occupy the Secret Service building. So he wasn't surprised at all, and he didn't want to hold these people accountable at all. He had to protect them. It was already frustrating enough that the Americans had gotten hold of their confidential information and were now wanted around the world. In the end, he was made a fool of by his own people. If it were him, he would have taken over the Secret Service building and taught those bastards a lesson. General Ji harshly reprimanded Tan Dongbang. Prime Minister Tan, don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you just because you're still the Prime Minister. If you hurt a single hair on my soldiers, I'll have the legal department sue you until you go to jail. Tan Dongbang laughed coldly. General Ji is too kind. As long as I am the Prime Minister of the Huaxia Empire, I will serve the Huaxia people. Your soldiers are human, but are the staff of the Secret Service not human? General Ji, you're the highest-ranking officer in the military. How can you speak like that? You know that I'm the highest authority in the military. Of course I have to speak up for my men. Is there a problem with that? General Ji didn't want to talk to him anymore. I'm going to the Secret Service right away. Tell your people to keep their guns close and don't expose them. Don't blame me for not warning you. Don't try to compete with my soldiers in marksmanship. My soldiers' marksmanship is so accurate that you want to cry. General Ji angrily spat out these words and hung up the phone with Tan Dongbang. He looked up at Secretary Chow and asked, "What's going on? Why did these people go to the Secret Service? Didn't Old Long and I reject the Americans a long time ago and ignore what they're doing?" While General Ji and Tan Dongbang were arguing over the phone, General Ji's personal secretary, Secretary Chow, had already gone to find someone to investigate the situation. General Ji saw him come in and finally hung up the phone with Tan Dongbang. Secretary Chow sighed. They didn't go there voluntarily. The Secret Service came with Prime Minister Tan's special authorization to ask them to go back and assist in the investigation. As soon as they got back, they were locked up in the execution room by Hong Kongquan and tortured. He sighed and shook his head in great regret. Those 27 people could be considered the backbone of the Special Operations Forces. Although the United States had seized the information this time and viciously slandered them around the world, General Ji and Speaker Long didn't care about it at all. They had no intention of giving in, and they didn't want to pay attention to the United States' unreasonable demands. Furthermore, these 27 people weren't field personnel to begin with. They were mainly providing technical support within the Special Operations Forces, so it didn't matter if the United States found out. They could continue to provide technical support as long as they didn't go abroad. So it's still related to that B*Tsh Tan Dongbang. General Ji slammed the table and stood up. He just pretended not to know anything. And what's going on with Hong Kongquan? Wasn't he locked up by Speaker Long? That old Long is so unreliable. Prime Minister Tan was the one who personally released him. Secretary Chow shook his head. You have to hurry over there. I'm worried that Prime Minister Tan will really go all out. A trace of worry flashed through General Ji's heart. He hurriedly put on his military cap and said, "Hurry up and inform Hua Xiaoheng. Just say that his soldiers are about to tear down the Secret Service." You can't say that, can you? Secretary Chow laughed. If Hua Xiao knows what's going on, he'll definitely come back and lead the charge. Hua Xiaoheng wasn't a narrow-minded person. If someone offended him personally, he would most likely be lenient and not pursue the matter. However, if someone offended his subordinates, his soldiers, or his women, he would definitely seek revenge for the smallest grievance. And regardless of whether they were in the right or wrong, he would first flog the other party 30 times before questioning them. Both sides would be enraged. as long as Hua Xiaoheng was informed, he would definitely continue to deal with the ignorant people in the cabinet and secret service. Lead the charge. I'll help too. General Ji glared at Secretary Chow. Hurry up and call. Secretary Chow quickly said, I heard that we already called before but Hua Xiao didn't pick up. Should I have the operator call again? Yes, hurry up and call. If you can't get through, go directly to the Special Operations Forces to find him. General Ji suddenly froze and turned to look at Secretary Chow. That's not right. If Xiaoheng was in the Special Operations Forces, who would be able to trick these 27 people away? I won't believe it even if you beat me to death. Secretary Chow began to smile bitterly. Yes, Hua Xiao really isn't in the Special Operations Forces. Where did he go? Hurry up and find him. General Ji rushed out of the office door looking very anxious. Secretary Chow hurriedly followed and said in a low voice, I heard from Zhou Qiyuan that Hua Xiao took a military plane to Sea City with Director Song early in the morning to monitor the magnetic field. In the end, we couldn't contact him at all for about 4 hours. Even the plane disappeared from the radar. We were worried that something had gone wrong. General Ji suddenly stopped in his tracks. He stopped so quickly that Secretary Chow, who was following behind him, almost bumped into his back. What did you say? We couldn't contact him at all for 4 hours. General Ji suddenly turned around. Why didn't anyone report to me? As soon as he finished speaking, his phone rang. He frowned and took it out to see that it was actually Hua Xiaoheng's number. General Ji breathed a sigh of relief and glared at Secretary Chow as he answered Hua Xiaoheng's call. It was the third watch. It was still the third watch today. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. It should be updated again tomorrow. Chapter 1065. Xiaoheng, are you okay? General Ji's impression of Hua Xiaoheng had improved because of what had happened with the 27 Special Operations Forces members. There were no weak soldiers under a strong general. This was exactly the situation. Whether his successor was qualified or not, he could not only look at his own ability, but also his ability to train his subordinates. Hua Xiaoheng was the sharpest weapon he had ever forged. And Hua Xiaoheng's soldiers were the sharpest weapons in his hands. As a soldier, would he still be a soldier if he had no guts? The soldiers of the Special Operations Forces needed to be able to adapt to changing circumstances. As soon as Hua Xiaoheng heard this, he knew that General Ji probably knew about their situation. He pursed his lips and said, Fortunately, we just carried out a round of anti-electromagnetic interference. Our plane is fine now. General Ji was stunned. Anti-electromagnetic interference? Hua Xiaoheng made the long story short. Yes. Not long after our plane took off, it was targeted by someone and used strong electromagnetic interference. The plane was lost for a while, and it took 3 to 4 hours to resolve the electromagnetic interference. However, our plane is almost out of fuel, and we've already applied for an air refueling plane from the military. However, we're a little worried that we won't be able to make it in time, so we wanted to inform you. Of course, the matter of Hua Xiaoheng personally calling General Ji to remind him of the refueling aircraft was probably at its last stage. Originally, the pilot of the plane requested an air refueling plane from the ground, but it didn't come. Although he didn't say it explicitly, how could General Ji, who was very familiar with him, not understand what he was implying? You're still on the plane? Is the plane running out of fuel? General Ji's expression changed. Seeing that Hua Xiaoheng's situation had worsened, he didn't tell him about the Secret Service's situation for the time being. He immediately picked up the landline phone and dialed the Air Force's number. Major General Hua is requesting an aerial refueling plane. Take off immediately. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you don't take off within 5 minutes, and if you don't reach your destination within 15 minutes, you'll be dealt with according to military law. The Air Force was shocked. Some of them had planned to dawdle for a few minutes, thinking that it was no big deal. They did not expect General Ji to personally call. Reporting to Chief. I guarantee to complete the mission. The people who wanted to stop them saw that the situation was not good and could only quietly slip away. 20 minutes later, Hua Xiaoheng's military plane finally began refueling. At this time, their plane was almost at the edge of the fuel limit. He sat in the cabin and looked ahead thoughtfully. Unlike the others, he didn't lean over to the window to watch the mid-air refueling. Song Jining watched for a while and sat next to Hua Xiaoheng. She patted his hand with lingering fear. Xiaoheng, it was too dangerous this time. In my opinion, the magnetic field that suddenly appeared in Sea City might be a trap. Hua Xiaoheng was also thinking about this possibility, But since they had already spent so much time and the flight route was closer to Sea City, he wanted to see what the other party was up to. Miss Song, how did you know about the magnetic field in Sea City? Hua Xiaoheng lowered his head, turned on his laptop and began to search for data. Song Jining looked around. Can we talk here? Speak. Hua Xiaoheng didn't look up. This was his personal plane, a command plane specially built for him. There was no one else in the room except for him and Song Jining. Song Jining was still worried. She took his laptop and wrote a few lines on the notepad on his laptop. Our Institute of High Energy Physics has a magnetic field instrument. It was left behind by my father, your grandfather. Back then he wasn't at the experimental base but stayed in the office of the Institute of High Energy Physics, so he escaped. Sea City is monitored all year round and is connected to our magnetic field instrument. Since a few days ago, the instrument has been showing signs intermittently. Today the magnetic field is completely formed. Song Jining said as she pulled up her magnetic field data map for Hua Xiaoheng to see. Hua Xiaoheng looked at it for a while and confirmed that the magnetic field had really appeared. He nodded slightly and thought to himself that after so many years, the elusive opponent had finally revealed himself. In fact, if the other party had remained dormant and did nothing, Hua Xiaoheng really wouldn't have had any clue how to catch him. But the other party seemed unwilling to give up, especially in the past 2 years, not only against him but also against Gu Nianji. This was interesting. In the past, Hua Xiaoheng had never connected the strange magnetic field to Gu Nianji. Everyone thought that Gu Nianji had just appeared at the wrong place at the wrong time 7 years ago. After all, the strange magnetic field had first appeared in the Huaxia Empire 17 years ago, long before Gu Nianji's appearance. But now he had enough evidence and logic to connect the two. This was all thanks to the other party's perseverance in wanting to kill him and Gu Nianji. The more they did, the more mistakes they made and the more they gave themselves away. Okay, let's go to Sea City. Hua Xiaoheng made the decision. It's closer and it was our original target. He closed the computer. The aerial refueling outside had already ended. At that moment, General Ji called again. Hua Xiaoheng put on his Bluetooth headset and answered calmly, "Hello, Chief." Song Jining heard Hua Xiaoheng address him as Chief, and knew that there weren't many people he would call Chief, so she took the initiative to leave. He was the only one left in the spacious cabin. At that moment, General Ji was already at the entrance of the Secret Service. In front of him were the 27 Special Operations Forces members who had confronted them. Seeing the bloodstains on their bodies and the bruises on their faces, his heart ached, but he still suppressed his anger and asked Hua Xiaoheng first. "Did you refuel?" "I just did." Hua Xiaoheng heard the pilot inform them that they would be arriving in Sea City soon, so he told General Ji. General Ji was silent for a while, then said, "Xiaoheng, there's something I have to tell you." He then told him about how the 27 Special Operations Forces members had taken over the Secret Service. Hua Xiaoheng's expression darkened. "Do you have photos of the scene? Send me a few." General Ji nodded. "I was there." As he spoke, he turned on his phone and used the live video call to contact Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng also turned on his phone and received the video call from General Ji. Soon, the Secret Service's iron-gray building appeared on the screen. There was a lush lawn in front of the building, as well as fully armed military police at the scene. There were police cars with flashing lights, and a few armored vehicles blocking in front of the police cars. General Ji's camera turned, and Tan Dongbang's face appeared on the screen. Hua Xiaoheng's eyebrows twitched. General Ji raised his phone again, and the people who appeared on the screen were the Special Operations Forces members that Deputy Director Feng had invited to assist in the investigation. Hua Xiaoheng took a quick look and saw that there were only about a dozen people. The other dozen people were probably hiding in various strongholds, and their sniper rifles were definitely aimed at the targets. Whoever moved would be killed. His gaze fell on the wounds of his soldiers and the corners of his mouth twitched. He could tell that these people had probably inflicted these wounds on themselves, but they had no choice. Otherwise they might not have been alive to see him. Hua Xiaoheng knew his subordinates very well. Without complete trust they wouldn't have gotten to where they were today. "General Ji, this is how the Secret Service treats our soldiers. What did they do wrong to be tortured like this?" Hua Xiaoheng stood up, his voice exceptionally stern. "Who sent these military police? Who treats their own people like this? I demand that they all withdraw." General Ji thought the same, but Tan Dongbang was too eloquent, and General Ji was no match for him. General Ji didn't want to argue with him in public as it would be beneath his status, so he put the phone on speaker and connected it to the live loudspeaker. Then he handed it to Tan Dongbang and said coldly, "Prime Minister Tan, Hua Xiao wants to speak to you." Tan Dongbang grinned and took the phone from General Ji's hand, not realizing that General Ji had already connected it to the live loudspeaker. He asked proudly, "Major General Hua, what can I do for you? Your soldiers are really—" Hua Xiaoheng cut him off firmly. "Prime Minister Tan, I demand that you withdraw all military police personnel and non-related personnel. Immediately. Immediately." Hua Xiaoheng's voice boomed like thunder through the loudspeaker, and everyone present jumped in shock. The Special Operations Forces members in the Secret Service building heard Hua Xiaoheng's voice and instantly became excited. They shouted in unison, "Greetings, Chief." Their voices shook the entire building. Although there were only 27 people, their aura was like hundreds and thousands of soldiers. Hua Xiaoheng heard the voices of his own people through the phone, and his heart calmed slightly. He said sternly, "Greetings, General Ji already knows about the Secret Service's torture of you. This time General Ji will help you seek justice. Don't be afraid." Tan Dongbang's nose twisted in anger when he heard this. "Hua Xiaoheng, what do you mean? It's your soldiers who beat up my people. They took over my building. They committed a serious crime. How dare you accuse me of that? How serious was a mutiny? In ancient times, 9 generations would have been executed. Did Hua Xiaoheng really not know, or was he pretending not to know?" Tan Dongbang cursed silently. Hua Xiaoheng didn't think much of it. "Your people? You're saying Hong Kongquan is your people? So Prime Minister Tan, you're siding with a traitor who attempted to murder and betray our high-ranking military officer, and you're trying to severely punish a war hero who fought a traitor to the death?" When the military and police present heard this, there was an uproar. They despised traitors the most. No matter what position they held, as long as they betrayed their country, they were their enemies. Even the muzzles of the armored vehicles turned and aimed at Prime Minister Tan and his people. Tan Dongbang's face was pale. He tried his best to control himself and said fiercely, "What nonsense are you spouting? When did Hong Kongquan attempt to murder our high-ranking military officer? Don't slander me." "Of course I have evidence. Prime Minister Tan, please don't continue to make things difficult for our war hero. As for the Secret Service, after something like this happened, they will be under military control according to regulations. General Ji, my people and I will obey your orders unconditionally." As Hua Xiaoheng spoke, he returned the authority to General Ji. This was the first night watch. Today was the third night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. The monthly vote was 4,800 plus updates at 1 p.m., and the third night watch was at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Steamed Bun Face for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 1066. General Ji clasped his hands behind his back in satisfaction as he admired Tan Dongbang's suddenly stiff expression with great interest. After a while he finally said loudly, "Prime Minister Tan Dai, there are only 2 more days until the vote. I think you'll be in great danger during these 2 days. In order to ensure your safety, I will suggest to Speaker Long that the military take over your security measures. Don't worry, we will definitely give you the most stringent security measures." The corners of Tan Dongbang's eyes twitched uncontrollably as he gritted his teeth. "No." As he spoke, he turned around and got into his Prime Minister's car. The person in charge of his security was originally a member of the Secret Service, but now that something had happened to the Secret Service, according to regulations, the Secret Service would now be under the control of the military. They looked at each other and didn't know who to listen to. Tan Dongbang's Prime Minister's car was parked there awkwardly, and no one dared to drive it away. General Ji sneered at the Prime Minister's car in front of him before returning to his own car and calling Speaker Long, "Old Long? Let me tell you something. I'm not sure if you know about it." General Ji quickly recounted how Tan Dongbang had used his Prime Minister's authority to release Hong Kongquan and torture the members of the Special Operations Forces. Speaker Long was sitting in his car on the way to the airport. He was so angry that his blood pressure was about to explode. "What did you say?" Tan Dongbang used his Prime Minister's authority to release Hong Kongquan and took 27 members of the Special Operations Forces to torture. He put down his phone and turned to look at Special Assistant Zhuang in exasperation. Tan Dongbang used his Prime Minister's authority to release Hong Kongquan. "Did you know about this?" Special Assistant Zhuang paused and quickly said, "I was busy with the reception with you today. No one told me?" As he spoke, he called the Secretariat to ask about the matter. The Secretariat was busy for a while before someone came to pick up the phone. This person was the intern Special Assistant Yang had brought in, Rong Mingxing. She said carefully, "Special Assistant Zhuang, here's the thing. Early in the morning, someone from where Director Hong was being held called and said that Director Hong had something to talk to you about. I said you were in a meeting with Speaker Long and asked him what it was, but he said forget it, so I just recorded it. Not long after, they called again and said that Prime Minister Tan wanted to use his Prime Minister's authority to release Director Hong. At the time, you and Speaker Long were busy with the reception and didn't have time to answer the phone, so I took the initiative to ask Special Assistant Yang, who was on leave at home. He said that Prime Minister Tan had this authority. He didn't need to ask Speaker Long for the other party to release him, so The corners of Special Assistant Zhuang's eyes twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't take it anymore and said, Special Assistant Yang is on vacation. How dare you ask him about something? Then he hung up the phone and said to Speaker Long guiltily, Speaker Long, they did call, but our secretariat didn't take it seriously, so. Speaker Long suppressed his anger and looked at his watch. It was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the German delegation would arrive in an hour. He could only say to General G, Old G, I'm on my way to the airport. I can't make it back in time. You have full authority to handle this matter according to the rules. You have my full authorization. After I'm done, I'll look for you to understand the situation. No problem. I will take care of it immediately. General G had been waiting for Speaker Long to say this. He had the style of a soldier and never procrastinated. As soon as he received Speaker Long's permission, he immediately deployed troops on the spot. He sent a team of military personnel to take over Tan Dongbang's security and replaced the Secret Service personnel. By doing this, he was actually monitoring Tan Dongbang so that he wouldn't use his position as Prime Minister to make one last desperate struggle. General G and Speaker Long had originally thought that Tan Dongbang would be as quiet as a chicken at this point. They hadn't expected him to still be so active. Not only was he active, but he had also almost caused a huge mess. Tan Dongbang watched helplessly as his security personnel were all replaced by military personnel. His expression was unusually dejected. However, he didn't dare to object anymore. When he had been waiting for the car to leave, he had called Hong Kongquan several times and discovered that the man's cell phone had been disconnected. As soon as he couldn't find the person who had confidently said that he would protect him if anything happened, Tan Dongbang immediately realized that the situation wasn't looking good. He sat restlessly in the car, his forehead and back covered in sweat. After General G took control of the situation in the Secret Service, he used the military police to take over the entire department and conduct a new security review. The 27 staff members of the Special Operations Forces who had been tricked were successfully brought back by General G. You guys stay in the Special Operations Forces and don't go anywhere. Wait for Xiaoheng to come back and make the decision for you. Do you understand? General G personally escorted them back to the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces and immediately called for the military doctors to examine their injuries. Chen Lai and Zhou Qiyuan came out to greet them. They were also shocked to see the injuries on these people. Zhou Qiyuan listened to General G's explanation and felt extremely ashamed. He quickly said, It's my fault. If I had asked a few more questions, they wouldn't have been taken away so easily. General G patted his shoulder. This isn't entirely your fault. Even old Long and I didn't realize that this *TCH Tan Dongbang could still use his privileges as Prime Minister to jump around. How can you guys be blamed? Zhou Qiyuan didn't have any problems from a procedural point of view. Moreover, the Secret Service had used Deputy Minister Feng to invite them. Even if Hu Xiaoheng was here, he probably wouldn't refuse to let them go. At most, if he was here, Hong Kongquan wouldn't dare to come and lie. Although Zhou Qiyuan had a certain level of prestige, he definitely couldn't compare to Hu Xiaoheng. Therefore, General G was very lenient with him. Don't worry, Chief. I will definitely look after the base and wait for Hu Xiao's return. Zhou Qiyuan gave General G a standard military salute. General G nodded. Alright, I don't need to say more. When Hu Xiao returns, tell him to come see me immediately. With General G's status, he didn't need to personally handle this matter. However, because it involved the Special Operations Forces as well as Tan Dongbang and Hong Kongquan, he took it very seriously and didn't trust anyone else to handle it. General G called Speaker Long from the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces. Everything has been taken care of, but what about Hong Kongquan? He seems to have already run away. The Secret Service was under military control, so all personnel had to register and undergo a second inspection. However, Hong Kongquan wasn't among the registered personnel. General G left people in the Secret Service to search for Hong Kongquan. It was the 27 people from the Special Operations Forces who said that Hong Kongquan had already run away when they took over the Secret Service. At the time, they didn't chase after him because they had a legitimate reason to do anything in the Secret Service. However, they didn't have a reason to go out and capture Hong Kongquan. Hua Xiaoheng had taught them many times that they shouldn't interfere in domestic affairs if they could. If they wanted to interfere, they must have authorization. They all firmly remembered this in their hearts. Everyone had their own accounts and knew where they stood and what they should do in domestic affairs. At that time, Speaker Long had already arrived at the airport and was ready to receive the German delegation. He looked at Gu Nianji, who was standing not too far away from him, and whispered to General Ji. Hong Kongquan can't run away. Issue a warrant for his arrest. It was the second night watch, and the monthly votes had been delivered at 4,800 plus one night watch. It was the third night watch today. A reminder for everyone, recommendation votes and monthly votes. It was the third night watch at 9 p.m. Chapter 1067. General Ji didn't hesitate. Seeing that Speaker Long had agreed, he immediately notified the police headquarters and asked them to issue a warrant for Hong Kongquan's arrest. Speaker Long put down the phone and sighed inwardly. Special Assistant Zhuang stood beside him and asked uneasily, "Speaker Long, do you need me to do anything?" Hong Kongquan was the minister of the cabinet, and General Ji was part of the military. If the military directly intervened, there would be more wrangling after this incident. Speaker Long thought about it. "Little Zhuang, can I trouble you to go back and help General Ji deal with this matter? On my behalf, if there are people in the cabinet who are unhappy, you can be there to shut them up." Considering the extent of Tan Dongbang's involvement in this matter, Speaker Long also felt that he couldn't take the people in the cabinet too lightly. Special Assistant Zhuang quickly said, "Speaker Long, you're being too serious. It's no trouble, I'll go back now. But here." He looked at the honor guard at the airport. In the blue sky not far away, a silver Lufthansa private plane was whistling over. At 5 in the afternoon, the Imperial Capital International Airport finally welcomed the private plane of the German delegation to China. Because this time it was the head of the German government, the Wuxia Empire rolled out a red carpet on the tarmac to reciprocate. Speaker Long shook his head. "You go, I'll have Nianji help me receive them. I'll go tell her, then I'll leave." Special Assistant Zhuang was a proper person, and he was also in a hurry to deal with the Secretariat. Rong Mingxing's decision today made Special Assistant Zhuang very angry. Who couldn't see Special Assistant Yang's situation? The extended leave was just to save his face, but it was actually a prelude for him to leave. She still thought of him as the backbone of the Secretariat. Was she stupid or brainless, or was she deliberately making things difficult for him? After Speaker Long nodded, Special Assistant Zhuang came to Gu Nianji's side and said quietly, "Nianji, thank you for today. I have urgent matters to attend to. Can you help Speaker Long receive the foreign guests?" Gu Nianji looked up in surprise. "Of course. But Special Assistant Zhuang, my rank isn't high enough. Will it appear that I'm not taking this seriously enough? It's fine, with Speaker Long here, the other party can't find fault." Special Assistant Zhuang was very satisfied with Gu Nianji's tactfulness. "Just stand next to Speaker Long. There are also people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are the main force to receive the German Chancellor's delegation. We're here to show how important we are." He pointed to where he had been standing. Today, when they came to the airport to welcome the foreign guests, they stood according to their positions. This was basic diplomatic etiquette and reflected the diplomatic attitude of equality. Diplomacy was no small matter. Otherwise, one would either humiliate the other party or oneself. Gu Nianji saw that Special Assistant Zhuang had made arrangements, so she didn't say anything else. "Then Special Assistant Zhuang, you can go back to work. I'll head over now." Special Assistant Zhuang left in a hurry, and Gu Nianji stood next to Speaker Long where Special Assistant Zhuang had been standing. Seeing that Gu Nianji had arrived, Speaker Long nodded slightly at her. "Nianji, sorry to trouble you today. Don't be afraid, just stand by my side." He then said, "There's a simultaneous interpreter over there. Are you wearing your headset?" Gu Nianji shook her head and said quietly, "I'm not wearing my headset, but I understand German." Speaking of which, her 2 months in Germany were not for nothing. At least she had learned a foreign language equals. Gu Nianji wore a navy Chanel business suit and stood next to Speaker Long. Among the row of men of all ages, Gu Nianji's bright and beautiful face was very eye-catching. Her large eyes were as bright as stars, and there was a faint smile on her face. Her temperament was unexpectedly calm and collected. Speaker Long saw that she was calm and collected, and he couldn't help but be even more satisfied with her. Gunyanji didn't have any other thoughts at this time. Her palms were slightly sweaty. It wasn't that she wasn't nervous, but she didn't show it. As the plane in the distance landed on the tarmac, they waited for another 15 minutes before the cabin door opened. The slightly chubby middle-aged woman that could often be seen on TV and online appeared at the cabin door and waved at everyone with a smile. This was the German Chancellor. Gunyanji returned a smile and watched as she slowly walked down the red-carpeted hanging stairs. Behind her were the important members of her team. They were all dressed in black formal suits with smooth lines that made their figures look better. Gunyanji's gaze swept over the faces of these people, and she gradually calmed down when she didn't see Reinitz. However, just when she thought that Reinitz might not appear in public, a tall, supermodel-like man appeared at the cabin door. He wore a German army cap, had a high nose, deep eyes, blonde hair and blue eyes. The shape of his eyebrows was very neat, as if they had been measured with a ruler, without a trace of impurities. He walked down the hanging stairs with a relaxed expression. His posture was leisurely and carefree, and there was a sense of indifference and calmness. It was as if he was thousands of mountains and rivers away, but he also had a kind of calmness that was close at hand. He raised his head from under the military cap, and his facial features were dyed by the setting sun. They were the typical Germanic beauty, and the small groove on his chin made people want to swallow. When he was expressionless, he had a religious air of abstinence, which formed a strong contrast with his tall, aggressive figure. As he walked down the hanging stairs, several young female attendants standing in the back couldn't help but exclaim, "Who is this? Oh my God! He's so handsome. And he's wearing a German army uniform. He's really abstinent." Although these voices were quiet, everyone still heard them. The corners of Gunyanji's mouth twitched. She thought that if she wasn't the pink piggy, she would be like these people right now, smitten with a handsome guy. Unfortunately, her current mood was really indescribable. As soon as she thought of Reinitz's reaction when he saw her, Gunyanji had the urge to run away. Because she knew very well that Reinitz knew who the pink piggy was. But he didn't seem to have told anyone. If he had, the German Chancellor definitely wouldn't have needed an urgent visit to Wuxia. Instead, she would have directly ordered the Wuxia Empire to hand over Gunyanji. Just as Gunyanji continued to feel anxious, the German Chancellor, who was smiling amiably, had already arrived in front of Speaker Long. She shook his hand warmly and spoke in German. Although Gunyanji didn't wear a headset for simultaneous interpretation, she could still understand what the German Chancellor was saying. She was greeting Speaker Long and asking why their Prime Minister didn't come. Speaker Long wanted to explain, but the simultaneous interpretation next to him seemed to be a bit slow. Speaker Long held the German Chancellor's hand, and his smile began to become awkward. Gunyanji spoke up next to him in standard Hanover German. "Your Excellency, Prime Minister, you should know that our interim general election will be held in 2 days. Currently, Prime Minister Tan is only acting as the Prime Minister. On such an occasion, his acting duties don't include this function. Since you asked this question, it must be because your subordinates didn't explain the situation to you, right?" She pointed out that the timing of the German Chancellor's visit to Wuxia was actually very inappropriate. She had an urgent matter at home, yet you still rushed to be a guest. Aren't you deliberately causing trouble? Then she pointed out that if the German Chancellor didn't ask the obvious and deliberately embarrass Speaker Long, then she was deceived by her subordinates and had a problem with her abilities. As soon as Gunyanji said these 2 sentences, the people around the German Chancellor couldn't remain calm. They quickly said that they had reported the situation to the Chancellor and blabbered on and on. Speaker Long felt carefree and laughed. "It's not a crime to be ignorant. It's not a crime to be ignorant." Now it was the German Chancellor's turn to smile awkwardly. She didn't expect her initial show of strength to be seen through by a woman who looked very young. The German Chancellor stopped in her tracks and instinctively glanced at Gunyanji. She had a deep impression of her. Reinitz finally walked over at that moment. He didn't have any expression on his face. His lake-like blue eyes flickered slightly as his gaze swept over Gunyanji's face. He had heard Gunyanji's voice when she spoke German just now, and it was as touching as he remembered. Just listening to her voice, his tranquil heart was stirred up. But when he followed behind the German Chancellor and quietly walked past Gunyanji, he didn't turn his head or make a sound. It was as if he didn't know her. Chapter 1068. The German Chancellor had brought a larger delegation to China this time, and the Wuxia Empire had also sent quite a number of Ministry of Foreign Affairs personnel with Speaker Long to welcome them. A group of people gathered together. They walked down the red carpet in a mighty manner. Gunyenji stood on the edge of the red carpet and politely took a small step back. Rhinitz's position happened to be close to her side of the red carpet. Gunyenji's eyes were straight ahead. Her face was expressionless, but her plump lips naturally curved into a smile. Rhinitz's face was also expressionless as he walked steadily in front of her. His steps were neither fast nor slow, and his straight back was wrapped in an extremely fitting German Army Major General uniform. He had silver epaulets and a red collar. The brass buttons on his chest were neatly buttoned, and he wore a shiny leather belt around his waist. His waist was like a bee's and his arms were like an ape's. His shoulders were broad and his legs were long. It was the standard posture of a soldier, but it also had a religious sense of asceticism. He walked in front of her with a small breeze, and the refreshing atmosphere hit her in the face. It was the scent of cool water cologne. It was as refreshing as if he had just walked from the blue sea. Fresh, sharp, clean and simple, it highlighted his masculinity that couldn't be ignored. Gunyenji saw his unattainable appearance, and then thought of the strong man in the Alps who was bare-chested in front of a small wooden hut chopping firewood, and the crystal beads of sweat rolling down his bronze back. She was confused. What kind of person was Rhinitz? He switched between the two roles with ease and seamlessly. Gunyenji had never doubted him when they were in the Alps. Until she was finally captured by Ea, Gunyenji looked down and stared at the red carpet in front of her. Then she remembered that Rhinitz was the head of the German Federal Intelligence Service. His identity was actually similar to He Xiaoheng's, so she quickly understood. Rhinitz and He Xiaoheng were essentially the same kind of people. They were what they needed to be. Because this was their profession and their job. Even professional actors weren't as professional as them, because actors weren't afraid of making mistakes. They had a director and lines and they could infinitely repeat a mistake. But if they made a mistake, there was only death for them. Because of this, their willpower was stronger and their acting was better. Gunyenji's heart, which had been in her throat, gradually calmed down. She was thinking too much. Rhinitz didn't expose her. Perhaps he wanted a greater benefit than exposing her. Gunyenji looked up calmly, and the smile on her lips gradually widened. At that moment, Rhinitz, who had been watching her out of the corner of his eye, sensed the change in her mood and suddenly looked over. Although it was only for a moment, his gaze was so intense that it almost lit a fire on Gunyenji's face. Gunyenji was slightly taken aback. She looked up, but Rhinitz had already looked away and walked to the front. At this time, the German Chancellor, who was walking in front, walked next to Speaker Long. She led her delegation to China and walked past the honor guard with ease, smiling and waving at the valiant honor guard. The music of the honor guard in the airport grew louder. The camera focused on them and everyone smiled politely. Life was like a play and the play was like life. Gunyenji sighed as she followed the group out of the airport. The group arrived at their respective cars and got in. Speaker Long was surrounded by members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as they got into the car in front. Gunyenji followed the people from the Secretariat and sat in the car in the back. As for Rhinitz and the others, they were probably in the car that the German embassy had come to welcome them. Soon the police cars in front cleared the way and the passing cars all gave way. They watched as rows of bulletproof cars drove on the spacious highway of the imperial capital. It was already around 7 o'clock in the evening when the cars took them to the banquet hall of the Parliament building. There would be a welcome reception and a small press conference to announce to the world that the Wuxia Empire in Germany would be holding friendly talks. It was Gunyenji's first time attending such a formal banquet. When she followed Speaker Long into the banquet hall, the Minister of Foreign Affairs walked over first and chatted with Speaker Long. She had no choice but to take a step back. Then the first secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Embassy in Germany came to get close to Speaker Long. This person used to be from Speaker Long's Senate Secretariat, so it could be considered as returning home. Gunyenji had no choice but to take another step back. Later, several simultaneous interpreters from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came forward and surrounded Speaker Long, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the first secretary of the Wuxia Embassy in Germany. She was completely pushed to the back. Gunyenji wasn't a professional translator to begin with. Her German was good enough for a few casual words, but it wasn't enough for a formal occasion. Moreover, Speaker Long's secretary, assistant and security personnel followed after, so Gunyenji fell behind with a clear conscience. She didn't want to be in the limelight at such an occasion at all. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to get used to such occasions and train her psychological endurance, Gunyenji didn't want to attend at all. If she had the time to go back and do a face mask or browse Weibo, wouldn't it be better? Why did she have to be so nervous here, worried that she would be rude and make a fool of herself at all times, and tarnish the reputation of the country and its people? Gu Nianji laughed at herself in her heart and found a corner to stand still. Although they were all on the banquet hall stage, her position was negligible. The banquet hall was shaped like a scallop, and at the front was a foot-high podium. There were now 2 high tables on it, and Speaker Long and the German Chancellor stood behind the tables. There was a microphone in front of them and they were giving a speech. Gu Nianji looked over and suddenly realized that this time, the 2 sides were standing in a staggered position. In other words, there was 1 person on the Wuxia Empire's side, and 1 person on the German side. There was no country on one side. Was this to reflect the friendly atmosphere of, I'm in you, and you're in me? Gu Nianji almost laughed out loud. The people who arranged this were really mischievous and ridiculous. However, it didn't take long for her to stop laughing. Because according to this arrangement, Reinitz was actually standing next to her. Gu Nianji wasn't short. She was already 1.7 meters tall at the age of 19, and with her decent half heels she was at least 1.75 meters tall. However, Reinitz, who was about the same height as Hua Xiaoheng, stood next to her and made her look shorter. Gu Nianji moved uncomfortably to the corner and put some distance between herself and Reinitz. There was enough room for another person to stand between the 2 of them. Compared to other people, there was more space between the 2 of them. This time there were more people on stage and less space. When it was finally time to stand and take photos, the people on the other side gradually squeezed over. When there were more people, the smell became stronger. Men's colognes weren't all the cool and refreshing smell of cool water, just like how women's perfume wasn't all the faint scent of roses. All kinds of strong and weak, light and heavy smells were mixed together and almost caused a chemical reaction in the air. Although Gu Nianji wasn't a delicate Princess P, she couldn't help but sniff with her delicate little nose. She almost fanned herself in front of her to get rid of the suffocating smell. Reinitz stood next to her with his hands behind his back. He still didn't look at her, but he was like a solid rock in front of her. He separated the gradually squeezing crowd on the other side and gave her a relatively spacious space. Although it was in the corner, it was comfortable enough. Also, the closer he stood, the more obvious the smell of cool water colognes on his body. It slightly offset the smell of the various colognes and perfume on the other side that were about to cause a chemical reaction. Gu Nianji felt that her breathing was smooth again. She couldn't pretend to be indifferent this time and said softly in standard Hanoverian German, "Danke, thank you." Reinitz didn't respond, as if he hadn't heard her thank you. He still had a solemn expression of religious abstinence on his face, but the slender fingers behind his back curled up almost imperceptibly. "We are honored to have the Prime Minister visit China this time. We hope that the 2 countries can uphold the principle of friendship and mutual assistance to develop international relations." The German Chancellor had already finished speaking, and now it was Speaker Long's turn to speak at the front. His youthful face and white hair were full of solemnity under the crystal lights. The German Chancellor next to him was slightly hunched, but her pair of shrewd blue eyes were unusually sharp. She listened to Speaker Long's speech and nodded with a smile. After the leaders of both sides finished speaking, it was time for the photo shoot. The people on both sides had already lined up and stood staggered on the banquet hall stage. Gu Nianji hid herself in the corner as much as possible and wished she could pull the curtain next to her to cover herself. Reinitz was secretly puzzled. If she didn't like this kind of occasion, why did she still come? In the blink of an eye, he had already taken a step forward without batting an eyelid. His tall and broad body stood firmly in front of Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't want anyone to see this embarrassing photo. She tried to shrink her shoulders and hide behind Reinitz. The professional photographer in front of them was holding a high-performance Leica camera and had already started pressing the shutter. After a few snaps, he smiled and snapped his fingers. "Done. Thank you for your cooperation." Speaker Long smiled and shook hands with the German Chancellor. "Thank you for your visit. There will be a small banquet later, and I hope you like our Wuxia cuisine." The German Chancellor laughed as soon as she heard this. The Wuxia Empire doesn't need to talk about anything else, but the food must be good. I've been here a few times, and the most impressive thing about this place is all kinds of delicious food. When she said this, she didn't turn off her microphone so her voice could be heard through the loudspeaker throughout the hall. The noisy and lively banquet hall fell silent for a moment. The receptionist from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately smoothed things over and said with a smile, "Your Excellency, don't belittle yourself. German food also has delicious food such as Bavarian white sausages." Every time I go to Germany, if I don't go to a Chinese restaurant, I can only eat this with my meal. Ha! Everyone in the banquet hall, regardless of whether it was the Germans or the Wuxia people, laughed. Gunyanji couldn't help but laugh as well. This person from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs really had a way with words. The German Chancellor's words implied that the Wuxia Empire only had food to offer. The staff from the Wuxia Empire's Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately retorted, meaning that Germany didn't even have food to offer, and the famous Bavarian white sausages were only substitutes for Chinese restaurants. However, Gunyanji still had an excellent impression of the Bavarian white sausages, and she couldn't help but gulp. Reinitz finally curled his lips and took a step back to stand side by side with Gunyanji. In the noisy hall, he looked forward with a faint smile on his lips. His voice was indescribably soft and light, and only Gunyanji, who was standing next to him, could hear it. He said, "I brought you Bavarian white sausages. Mother Hannah made them herself. This was the first night watch. Today was the fourth night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. At 1 p.m., the monthly votes would be 5,100 plus updates. The third night watch would be at 7 p.m., and the fourth night watch would be at 9 p.m. P.S. Thank you to the leader Enigma Yangxi and Dodo Scissors for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins the day before yesterday. Thank you to the leader Momo Moshi for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. P.S. Thank you everyone for your understanding and support yesterday. This matter was resolved so quickly because of everyone's support. Love you all." Chapter 1069. Mother Hannah? Bavarian white sausage? Gunyanji thought she was hallucinating when she heard these two unfamiliar yet familiar words. She instinctively looked up and glanced at Reinitz. Reinitz happened to look down at her, and their eyes were glued to each other. Her mind was filled with the real and fake entanglement of the two of them in the Alps. Reinitz didn't know when Gunyanji realized his identity and became wary of him. Gunyanji also didn't know why Reinitz was getting close to her. But no matter what, if Reinitz hadn't set up a trap within a trap in the Alps, she might have really died there. Gunyanji's emotions were extremely complicated, and even her mouth had a faint bitter taste. She took a deep breath and said in German, "Danke, thank you." It seemed close, but it was actually far away. He was polite and distant. She should indeed be grateful that he had specially brought her a thoughtful gift from thousands of miles away. But was he really doing this for her? Gunyanji smiled bitterly from the bottom of her heart. She instantly understood that Reinitz must have had other motives for coming this time. If he really was doing this for her own good, he should have pretended not to know her from beginning to end. What was the meaning of bringing up Mother Hannah and Bavarian white sausage now? She knew that since Reinitz was the director of the German Federal Intelligence Service, Mother Hannah must also be on his side. Reinitz's eyes flickered slightly, but he quickly calmed down and looked ahead with a smile. He hadn't misjudged her. Gunyanji was too smart. He only said one sentence and her feelings towards him changed. He really didn't know whether to praise her for being so perceptive or to be worried about her sharp intuition. Since she was wary, Reinitz didn't say anything else. There was no point in saying anything more. After a while, the group photo was over. The people on the stage dispersed and scattered throughout the banquet hall. The long tables in the banquet hall were filled with Wuxia delicacies, and there were professional chefs behind each table. This was a high-end buffet with professional chefs on site, not an ordinary buffet with a pot of rice. Gunyanji looked at her watch. It was already past 8 in the evening. She hadn't eaten since 1 in the afternoon, so she was famished. Carrying a snow-white plate of bone china inlaid with orchids, she picked a few of her favorites from the long table. A piece of braised red meat the size of a mahjong block was stewed in brown sauce. It was 30% fat and 70% lean. It was neither soft nor dry, but neither greasy nor greasy. It melted in the mouth and was just right, fragrant and delicious. Gunyanji finished one piece and wanted another. However, this particular type of red braised pork was placed neatly on the long table in a small, smoky green goblet. There was a fixed number of them. Basically, there was one piece for each person. Whoever ate one more piece, there would definitely be someone who couldn't eat it. Of course, not everyone would eat a piece. But the banquet had just begun. No one knew if everyone would eat a piece, right? Gunyanji hesitated. Standing in front of the small goblets of braised pork, her large, dark eyes revealed a hint of reluctance. Her gaze was extremely gentle, as though she was looking at her lover. Reinitz didn't eat much. He held a glass of red wine in one hand and a few slices of Hunan lean pork sausages on the bone china plate in the other. He tasted it. It was rather dry, but it tasted really good. It wasn't inferior to their Bavarian white sausages, and it was especially chewy. If she was used to eating this kind of delicacy, why would she keep thinking about their white sausages? Perhaps it was because to her, at that time and place, white sausages represented hope for life. Reinitz shook his head. He caught a glimpse of Gunyenji standing in front of the long table nearby and slowly walked over. Standing beside her, he asked the professional chef, "What's in these small jars?" "Red braised pork." The chef didn't speak English, so he could only ask Gunyenji, "Can you translate for me?" Gunyenji nodded and calmly said a French term, bouillie, then explained in English, "Pork with barbecue sauce." Reinitz raised his light brown, neat eyebrows. "Bouillie? That's too bad. I don't like it." Gunyenji was speechless. The professional chef asked Gunyenji anxiously, "May I ask what he said?" Gunyenji hesitated. "He said he doesn't like it." The professional chef's expression immediately darkened. He crossed his arms and said unhappily, "He hasn't even tried it yet. How can he not like it? Look at the color of the sugar, smell the sauce, and the ratio of 30% fat to 70% lean. It's the standard Southern-style red braised pork." Gunyenji laughed. "That's right. It's so delicious. This German doesn't have the luck to like it. Why don't you give me another glass? I already had a glass and I want more." The professional chef was beaming with joy at Gunyenji's words. He felt like he had regained all of the dignity he had lost at Reinitz's restaurant, so he gave her 2 cups of braised pork. "Here, have some. I'm only willing to give it to people who know what's good." As she spoke, she rolled her eyes at Reinitz. Gunyenji was speaking Mandarin to the professional chef. She took advantage of Reinitz not understanding what they were talking about, so she was a bit unrestrained. She smiled and put the 2 small glasses on the bone china plate. She added fuel to the fire and said to the professional chef, "You're right. We can't even get enough of our own Wuxia delicacies. If they weren't foreign guests, we wouldn't even bother with them." The professional chef was amused by Gunyenji's words and couldn't help but give Gunyenji another glass of red braised pork. Reinitz had been smiling faintly at the side the whole time. His eyes kept moving between the professional chef and Gunyenji with a curious expression, as if he didn't understand what they were talking about. However, when the professional chef was about to put the 3rd small glass of red braised pork on Gunyenji's bone china plate, Reinitz reached out and blocked the professional chef. He said in an extremely gentle voice, "That's enough. Any more and she'll have diarrhea." Reinitz spoke in a very pleasant Hanoverian German. Gunyenji remembered the night she met Reinitz. She had diarrhea because she was so hungry that she ate too many white sausages. She suddenly blushed. She quickly greeted the professional chef and turned to leave the red braised pork stall with the bone china plate. She found a place to sit down. Reinitz followed behind her unhurriedly with a smile. He sat down across from her and said, "You should eat less of such oily food." At this time he was speaking in perfect Chinese. Gunyenji felt like she was struck by lightning. She suddenly looked up at Reinitz and opened her mouth. Finally she asked him, "You can actually understand Mandarin? When did you learn Mandarin? How much did you learn?" Didn't Reinitz hear her and the professional chef ridiculing the German delegation to China without the slightest scruple? This was a diplomatic faux pas. Gunyenji wanted to find a hole to hide in. Reinitz smiled at her embarrassment and said nonchalantly, "I just happened to understand what you were saying to the chef." He then added in Mandarin, "You were saying bad things about us and laughing at us." Gunyenji was speechless. In the banquet hall, the German delegation and the Wuxia Imperial reception team were chatting amiably in groups of 2s and 3s. Therefore, Reinitz and Gunyenji's side wasn't particularly eye-catching. However, they were the 2 most good-looking people present, so although they looked normal, they still attracted a lot of attention. Many people were secretly sizing them up. A beautiful blonde woman from the German delegation kept staring in Reinitz's direction but didn't have the courage to come over and disturb them. Some people on Speaker Long's side also saw Gunyenji and Reinitz sitting together. Someone began to criticize Gunyenji in front of Speaker Long. "Speaker Long, look over there. This little girl only knows how to look at appearances. She didn't even come over to help entertain the German Chancellor." Speaker Long glanced at her with a smile and said, "Nyenji is young but she knows her limits. That man over there is the director of the German Federal Intelligence Service, right? She can go receive them. She knows a little German and is very smart, so it's fine. Most importantly, Gu Nianji grew up with Hua Xiaoheng and was much more secretive than the other people in the Senate. Speaker Long felt that even if Hua Xiaoheng didn't personally deal with Reinitz, Gu Nianji, who had grown up with Hua Xiaoheng, would be able to handle him. Of course, that being said, Speaker Long still had to talk to Reinitz. He looked over at the German chancellor and saw that she was chatting happily with the German diplomats from the Huaxia embassy. He got up and left to go over to Gu Nianji's side. It was the second night watch, and the monthly tickets had been delivered at 5,100 plus one night watch. It was the fourth night watch today. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. The third night watch at 7 p.m. and the fourth night watch at 9 p.m. Chapter 1070. Speaker Long had just exchanged a few words with the German chancellor. Now that the German chancellor was surrounded by the diplomats of the German embassy in the Huaxia Empire, there was no need to pay attention to them anymore. Speaker Long walked to where Reinitz and Gu Nianji were sitting. Gu Nianji saw that Speaker Long had arrived and quickly stood up to offer her seat. "Speaker Long, please sit." Speaker Long didn't stand on ceremony. He sat down where Gu Nianji had been sitting and said to Reinitz, "Major General Reinitz, are you used to our Huaxia Empire's food?" He spoke in Chinese. Reinitz looked at him with a smile, as if he didn't understand what he was saying. Gu Nianji secretly cursed him for being so sly, but she still coughed lightly and translated for Speaker Long in German. After listening to her translation, Reinitz smiled and said in English, "It's delicious. I like it very much. I wanted to thank this lady for her hospitality, and I gave her some of the Bavarian white sausages I brought from Germany, but she wouldn't take them. You are her boss, aren't you? Can you make her accept it?" Speaker Long understood English and his face lit up when he heard that. Bavarian white sausage? Alright, I want to try it too. Why don't we eat it together? Gu Nianji secretly gave Speaker Long a thumbs up for his adaptability. Reinitz looked at Gu Nianji inquiringly. Gu Nianji had no choice but to continue translating. Speaker Long asked if we could share it with everyone? Reinitz immediately nodded and said in English, "Of course. I'll go back and find it in my suitcase. I'll give it to you tomorrow when we come to the meeting." "Ah, thank you very much." Speaker Long laughed heartily and continued, "Major General Reinitz, is this your first visit to our country?" The significance of Reinitz's visit was indeed extraordinary. There were so many countries on the blue planet, but it was rare for an active intelligence chief to visit other countries. Therefore, Reinitz's visit to the Hua nation was of great significance. Considering their demands, Speaker Long became even more vigilant. They wanted the pink piggy. But in Speaker Long's opinion, the pink piggy was a national hero of the Huaxia Empire. Want them to hand over the pink piggy? It doesn't exist, don't think too much about it. Reinitz understood Speaker Long's intentions and took the opportunity to probe Speaker Long's intentions. Therefore, after Gu Nianji translated Speaker Long's words, Reinitz said in German, "This is indeed my first time in your country. Because the pink piggy is too important to me, I want to try and see if I can bring her back." Gu Nianji, MMP. How was she supposed to translate that? Speaker Long waited for a while and saw that Gu Nianji didn't speak. He thought that she didn't know how to translate, so he quickly said, "Nianji, do you want to find a simultaneous interpreter?" Gu Nianji snapped back to reality and saw Reinitz's pale lips curl up from the corner of her eye. She steeled her heart and said calmly, "Major General Reinitz said that this is indeed his first time in our country. Because the pink piggy is too important to their country, he wants to try and see if he can bring the pink piggy back." Reinitz raised an eyebrow. He had clearly said that the pink piggy was very important to him, but Gu Nianji had deliberately translated it as their country. He was trying to draw a line between them. Speaker Long's expression immediately became serious. "We have already stated to your country that if you think the pink piggy is a citizen of our country, please produce evidence. You must have concrete evidence. Don't use simple and crude logic like, whoever benefits the most is the murderer, to discuss international issues. We don't accept it, we don't cooperate, and we don't care." Reinitz wasn't surprised by Speaker Long's toughness. He glanced at Gu Nianji and asked her in German, "What is your Mr. Speaker saying? Is he saying that he wants to hand over the pink piggy to me to bring home?" Gu Nianji, why didn't she know that Reinitz had such a shameless side? Speaker Long looked at Gu Nianji with a stern expression and said in a low voice, "Translate it for him." Gu Nianji had no choice but to keep a calm expression on her face as she translated Speaker Long's words in German. Reinitz could actually understand Speaker Long's Mandarin, But he didn't want others to know that he understood German, so Gunyanji had to translate every time. Gunyanji almost couldn't help but expose his true ability to understand Mandarin, but Reinitz only needed to glance at her lightly, and she felt a great deal of pressure. She also knew that if she told him about Reinitz, Reinitz would definitely not be lenient. Perhaps he would even say that she was the pink piggy. In short, from the moment they met, Reinitz had been testing and evaluating her. She didn't know what he was trying to do. Gunyanji was becoming more and more annoyed, and a faint impatience appeared in her eyes. Of course, Speaker Long couldn't see it. He could only see that Gunyanji's attitude was becoming more and more serious, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. This made him very pleased. She was indeed a good seedling who knew her priorities. The more Speaker Long looked at Gunyanji as his successor, the more he liked her. He actually couldn't bear to let her bear too much pressure. He stood up and didn't continue on this topic. He nodded at Reinitz. Okay, we'll talk about this during the formal meeting tomorrow. You just arrived today, so have a good rest first. Gunyanji translated, and Reinitz bid farewell to Speaker Long in English. Speaker Long waved at him and said to Gunyanji, "Treat Major General Reinitz well. Remember to attend the bilateral meeting with me tomorrow. I hope you can be my legal advisor." Gunyanji quickly said, "I will definitely be there. Thank you, Speaker Long." This was an opportunity for her. As a legal intern, it was a great opportunity and luck for her to be able to participate in such a bilateral meeting between countries. Speaker Long patted her on the shoulder with a smile and returned to his seat. Only Reinitz and Gunyanji were left in the corner. "Your country is unwilling to hand over the pink piggy," Reinitz whispered from behind Gunyanji. Reinitz whispered behind Gunyanji. He spoke in Mandarin, and his tone was softer than when he spoke German. Gunyanji turned around, but what she saw was Reinitz's masculine aura and face. His soft voice and his aura were indeed in extreme contrast. This kind of contrast didn't make you feel that he was weak. Instead, it made you feel that his strength was unfathomable. Because only a man who was strong enough wouldn't be stingy to show his gentle side. Of course, Gunyanji also understood that everything Reinitz showed was what he wanted her to see. It might not be his true side. Just like the encounter in the Alps, Reinitz had carefully planned it for Gunyanji. His gestures and external aura were more similar to Huo because he must have investigated Gunyanji and knew that this was the only way to make Gunyanji let down her guard quickly and get closer to her heart faster. It was the third watch. Today was the fourth watch. Everyone's recommendation votes and monthly votes. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. Chapter 1071. Why would our country hand over the pink piggy? Gunyanji frowned. No sane person would think that way. Of course, people with crooked butts would definitely be willing. Therefore, those who led the way online were the most vocal. It seemed like if they didn't hand over the pink piggy, they would be surprised by our friends, and our country is about to fall. Reinitz stared at her and thought about it silently for a while before nodding. I understand. Gunyanji was even more shocked. What was Reinitz thinking? She and he were completely hostile to each other. Reinitz only looked at her with a faint smile on his face and changed the topic. He asked, "Why are you returning the money to me? You don't even want the gift I gave you?" Gunyanji was speechless. After a while, she remembered that Reinitz had given her the money to buy a Hermes bag, and Huo had transferred it back to Reinitz. Gunyanji's eyes flashed. Reinitz leaned back in his seat and said slowly, "Mr. Huo actually knew my bank account number. That really surprised me." He was more than surprised. When he saw the extra money in the account, he was shocked. Gunyanji smiled. What's the big deal? Major General Reinitz actually knew I would appear in the mountains of the Alps. That's surprising. Reinitz saw that Gunyanji was finally talking about that time and couldn't help laughing self-deprecatingly. He looked down and fiddled with the red wine glass in his hand. He said quietly, "It's nothing. It's not worth mentioning." Gunyanji was speechless. Perhaps the two of them had been talking for a long time, or perhaps Reinitz's smile was becoming more and more charming. Finally, someone couldn't sit still anymore. A member of the German delegation to China walked over and smiled at Reinitz. "Major General Reinitz, Her Excellency the Chancellor wants you to go over." Reinitz looked up at where the German Chancellor was and saw her nod at him. Reinitz stood up and signaled to Gunyanji with his eyes. "Then I'll excuse myself." Gunyanji nodded. "Go ahead." After Reinitz left, the beautiful blonde woman appeared and stood across from Gunyanji, next to where Reinitz had been sitting. She asked politely, "May I sit down?" She spoke American English, which was rare among Germans. Germany is in Europe. Germans speak English with a British accent. In other words, most of the people in continental Europe spoke English with a British accent. Moreover, this woman was a rare beauty. There weren't many beautiful women in Germany, but every single one of them was of high quality. Therefore, Gunyanji couldn't help looking at the woman a few more times and said politely, "This seat isn't mine." The woman, seeing that Gunyanji wasn't willing to make the decision, she didn't pretend to be polite and sat down. She smiled and said, "Major General Reinitz won't be unhappy about this. After all, he took care of me the most along the way." Gunyanji smiled. How was she supposed to answer that? Whether Reinitz was happy or not, it was none of her business. She tactfully changed the topic, narrowed her eyes and asked, "Did you also come with the Prime Minister?" "Of course." The beautiful blonde woman puffed out her chest. "I'm the Public Relations Secretary of the Prime Minister's office. I'm responsible for helping the Prime Minister coordinate relations between various departments." She hadn't had the opportunity to interact with Reinitz, the famous Major General of the Federal Intelligence Agency. But this time, Reinitz had followed the German Prime Minister to China, and she had taken the opportunity to get to know him. She had thought of various ways to get close to Reinitz along the way. In her opinion, the only thing left between her and Reinitz was for someone to poke the veil between them. She hadn't expected that Reinitz, who hadn't spoken much along the way, would smile so gently at the dark-haired, dark-eyed woman and say so much. Gunyanji could feel the woman's monstrous jealousy, but she thought the woman had mistaken her for someone else. Who was she to Reinitz? Was she worth this woman's jealousy? Gunyanji rested her chin on her hand and furrowed her long brows as she looked at the beautiful blonde woman in front of her. She wondered if she had been like this woman at the time, suppressing her anger when other women approached Hua Xiaoheng. Now that she thought about it, not only would Hua Xiaoheng find it inexplicable, but she wouldn't be worth it either, right? The woman saw that Gunyanji didn't speak and thought she had intimidated her. Her eyes became even more arrogant as she smiled faintly and said, "My name is Maddie Paolomio." After she finished speaking, she looked at her motionlessly as if waiting for her to kneel down and kiss her feet. Gunyanji was speechless. She was a little annoyed. "Even if you came with the German Prime Minister, don't look at people like that, okay? Wake up, it's been more than 100 years since the Eight-Nation Alliance." Since the woman's gaze wasn't very friendly, Gunyanji planned to give her diplomatic equal treatment. She put away the smile on her face and slightly raised her chin at a 45-degree angle. She also said arrogantly, "My name is Nianji Gu." She said it as if no one knew how to write their name upside down. Maddie froze for a moment. This woman's reaction wasn't right. In Europe, who didn't want to kneel down and kiss her feet when they heard her name? Even the current German Prime Minister couldn't neglect her. But from the black-haired, black-eyed woman in front of her, she could see that she was being negligent. Maddie frowned and soon realized that this was not Europe. This Chinese woman had probably never left the country in her life, so she did not know about their family's prestigious status in Europe. Therefore, she quickly understood and said with a smile, "I have an elder sister who is married to an Italian count. I also have a younger sister who is dating the Prince of Morocco." Gunyanji was still nonchalant. "Well then, congratulations." This reaction was still not right. Maddie couldn't take it anymore and said, "Do you know who Major General Reinitz is? Don't even think about it. His family won't let him marry an Asian woman with black hair and black eyes." Gunyanji, don't force her to say MMP for the second time today. Although Gunyanji was extremely annoyed, she maintained a calm expression and said, "Who are you to Major General Reinitz? Girlfriend or fiancé?" "Maddie, say it. Who are they?" Gunyanji looked at Maddie's speechless expression and knew that this was another one of Reinitz's infatuated fans. Compared to the current Maddie, Gunyanji patted her chest and thought that it was fortunate that even if she was jealous back then, she would only argue with Hua Xiaoheng and not show off to her imaginary enemy. This was because she was too ugly, too horrible to look at, and too stupid to laugh at. Maddie was infuriated by Gunyanji's nonchalant attitude. "You are so ignorant, narrow-minded, and despicable." Maddie's chest heaved with anger. "What does my relationship with Reinitz have to do with you?" That was more like it. She had some fighting spirit now. However, did she really think that she was superior just because her family had a noble title? Gunyanji was not unaware of the Borromeo family's background. She leaned back in the high-backed soft chair and said lazily, "Miss Maddie Borromeo, your family started out in business. The Merchant of Venice was written based on your ancestor, wasn't it?" "Oh, that's not right." Or was granddad written based on your ancestor? Your ancestor made more money so that you could live a happy life. You should cherish it. Wasn't it good to be alive? Why did she have to court death in front of her? Maddie trembled and her face flushed and then paled. She did not expect this dark-haired, dark-eyed woman to know her family. Her family did start out in business in Italy, but now they had a noble title and were no longer lowly merchants. So her ignorance was all an act. Maddie stood up abruptly and hurriedly said to Gunyenji, Major General Reinitz is from the Hohenzollern family. You can investigate the Hohenzollern family before you speak nonsense in front of me. She then hurriedly left. Gunyenji froze. Hohenzollern? That name sounded even more familiar. When she had gone to Germany with Hijichu to fight the lawsuit, she had carefully read up on the European continent, especially its history and current gossip. There were two sources of gossip in Europe. One was the entertainment industry, and the other was the royal families that had become mascots. That was why she knew the Borromeo surname and thought of the Hohenzollern family. The Hohenzollern family had once ruled the German Empire, but their rule, like the Eight-Nation Alliance, had been overthrown more than 100 years ago. Why was this woman flaunting that broken family name in front of her? Gunyenji wanted to slap her in the face. Did the nobles have balls? Gunyenji laughed internally and looked up to see Reinitz sitting over. He asked her, You were talking to Maddie just now? Gunyenji nodded with a smile. Yes, the little princess warned me to stay away from you. Reinitz's heart skipped a beat. He looked at her and smiled. His voice was extremely gentle. Then I have to stay closer to you. If you run too far away, I won't be able to catch up. It was the fourth watch. It was the fourth watch today. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes and monthly votes. Good night, sweethearts. Chapter 1072. Gunyenji couldn't help but laugh when she heard Reinitz say he wanted to chase her affectionately. He probably wasn't chasing her because he had feelings for her, but rather, chasing a fugitive. Gunyenji was very clear about her position in Reinitz's heart. Because Reinitz had lied to her so harshly in the German Alps, she couldn't fool herself into thinking that Reinitz had done so much just because he was in love with her. What a joke. If Reinitz was such a love brain, how could he be the director of the German Federal Intelligence Service? Also, he was about the same age as Hua Xiaoheng and also held the rank of Major General. It was clear that this person's abilities couldn't be underestimated. Gunyenji used a small silver spoon to dip in the small stew pot and said slowly, Major General Reinitz, I'll listen to you for now. But you have to comfort that little princess. The Romeo family's daughter is really a treasure in Europe. In terms of financial resources, the current Hohenzollern family wasn't even a fraction of that. Therefore, other than the British royal family, all the royal families in Europe wanted nothing more than to lick the little princess of the Romeo family. She was so proud, so she did have confidence. Of course, this kind of confidence was nothing to Gunyenji. Reinitz couldn't tell if he was disappointed or satisfied. He looked at Gunyenji with a smile and whispered, Are you really angry? Why don't you believe me? Everything I said to you was from the bottom of my heart. His words were filled with deep affection and were spoken with a baritone like the middle string of a cello. It was a feast for the ears. But Gunyenji wasn't so easily fooled. She slowly raised her head and said expressionlessly, Believe your words? If I believed you, you should be an orphan raised by Mother Hannah and not a member of the Hohenzollern family? Reinitz was slightly taken aback. You knew? Not many people knew his identity even in Germany. Maddie told you? Gunyenji nodded. Little Princess Maddie said you were a member of the Hohenzollern family and told me to think about my position, so I had to stay away from you. So that was what happened. Reinitz rubbed his temples. He didn't feel very annoyed. He was just thinking about how to tell Gunyenji about this. After a while, he put down his hand and said frankly, I am a member of the Hohenzollern family, but I am also an orphan. I did not lie to you. It was Mother Hannah who raised me. Gunyenji listened attentively to Reinitz's words and instantly found several loopholes. Major General Reinitz, do you know that a one-sided truth is also a lie? Reinitz narrowed his eyes and stared fixedly at her with his azure blue eyes. They were like the famous Heart of Midnight sapphire, so blue that they actually had the color of the night. If the color of a European's blue eyes was not pure, they would appear too empty, like a clear lake where one could see the bottom at a glance. Without depth they would naturally be less attractive. But Reinitz's blue eyes were incomparably deep at this moment. When he looked at her, it seemed like he was talking, full of affection. He continued to stare at Gunyenji until she looked away awkwardly. Reinitz then said, "One-sided truth? What do you mean? Still not admitting it?" Gunyenji looked back at him. Her dark, glass-like eyes were as seductive as ever. "Do you really want me to say it? You can say anything in front of me. Don't worry." Reinitz nodded slightly and raised his hand to signal for her to continue. Since Reinitz didn't care, Gunyenji didn't care either. She curled her lips and said with a smile, "Okay, then let's talk about the one-sided truth. You said you are a member of the Hohenzollern family, but you are also an orphan. If this is true, then it means your parents died. And you were raised by Mother Hannah. How did she raise you? She doesn't look like a rich person. Of course, maybe I was wrong about her. Mother Hannah is a rich person who hides her wealth." Reinitz laughed. His laughter was magnetic and very pleasing to the ear. Gunyenji couldn't help fiddling with her earlobe and said, "From your reaction, Mother Hannah isn't rich, but she raised you. You don't look like you were born in a poor family. Don't you think there are many contradictions in this? A very down-to-earth, commoner mother raised a son with the temperament of a noble. Not only was he a noble, but the current Reinitz was very different from the Reinitz who chopped wood in the Alps. He was like a different person. His every movement was very elegant and stylish. This kind of bearing and behavior was definitely cultivated from a young age. The Reinitz in the Alps was the role he had played. The current Reinitz was the real Reinitz. Reinitz listened to Gunyenji's analysis, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. This woman had extremely terrifying observation and analytical skills. She also had a very high level of insight and knowledge. The former wasn't particularly amazing. Many geniuses could also have such observation and analytical skills after training. The latter was really different because insight and knowledge weren't innate. Even if it was nurtured, many factors were needed, such as the right time, place, and people. If someone had a high IQ, terrifying observation and analytical skills, as well as an unusually broad outlook and knowledge, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Reinitz raised his wine glass to Gunyenji without batting an eyelid. He took a sip and felt his heart suddenly skip a beat. Gunyenji was also observing Reinitz, and the subtle changes in his expression didn't escape her eyes. Gunyenji was even more confident in her analysis. She continued to follow her train of thought. "If you really are an orphan and Mother Hannah really raised you, but with your current achievements and aura, can I infer that Mother Hannah was actually just one of your adoptive mothers? Or one of your adoptive parents?" Gunyenji tried to throw out her first inference. Reinitz didn't expect Gunyenji to be able to suddenly divert to this extent. His eyes flashed in surprise. Gunyenji curled her lips into a smile. "I guessed correctly." Reinitz was speechless. "That means there was more than one person who raised you when you were growing up. Let's think again. Under what circumstances can an orphan be raised by different people who not only raise the orphan to be elegant and capable, but also able to rise through the ranks like a rocket?" Reinitz narrowed his eyes and interrupted Gunyenji's speculation with a smile. "What are you trying to say? I suspect that you are the beneficiary of one of the German Gestapo's programs." Gunyenji shrugged. This was the information she had seen when she helped Zhao Liangzi decipher the German Federal Intelligence Service's intelligence documents. They adopted some talented orphans from a young age and taught them various skills. In the end, they were able to play a role for the country. This is the only way to explain how you grew up to be the way you are now. Reinitz didn't speak for a long time. Gunyenji bowed. "Did I guess correctly?" Reinitz looked at her and was about to speak when he saw the big TV camera slowly turn in their direction. Reinitz suddenly smiled and raised his wine glass. "Have a drink with me and I'll tell you." Gunyenji shook her head. "I can't drink. How about this, I'll replace wine with fruit juice and have a drink with you." No matter what Reinitz's motives were, he finally let her go and helped her hide her identity as the pink piggy. Gunyenji wasn't someone who didn't know what was good for her. She raised the grape juice glass in front of her and clinked glasses with Reinitz. Both of them smiled extremely charmingly. Gunyenji used all the acting skills she could muster to make this expression. Reinitz, on the other hand, had a bit of sincerity that even he didn't realize he was performing at his best. In the eyes of outsiders, it was truly a harmonious picture of a handsome man and a beautiful woman. The director of the TV station captured this scene and treated it like a treasure. This was probably the best scene they got that night. Therefore, when the Wuxia Empire's evening news aired at 9 p.m., the scene of Gunyenji and Reinitz drinking together and the scene of the two countries standing together for a photo became the highlight of the evening news. At 9 p.m., the intersection of Sea City's downtown area was still bustling with activity. There was a small square there, and there was originally a musical fountain, but it was still spring and the nights were relatively cold. The musical fountain would only open in the summer, so it was now just a dry cement puddle. There were many high-rise buildings, and the outer wall of a building near the square was a large LCD screen that played advertisements, music, movies, and variety shows 24 hours a day. A yellow Hummer SUV with a military license plate was parked not far from the building. Xiaoheng, who was wearing a crisp, thin casual shirt, leaned against the door of the Hummer. He fiddled with the lighter that Gun Yanji had given him and held a cigarette in one hand. He looked calm as he guarded the area. Song Jining was in a large van in the back, adjusting the equipment and measuring the magnetic field data. At this intersection, there were many plainclothes Special Operations Forces personnel scattered in all corners, closely watching the crowd. At that moment, the evening news began, and the large TV hanging on the wall of the opposite building began to broadcast the evening news of the imperial capital. The German delegation to China held the first round of informal meetings with our Speaker of Parliament and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at 7 p.m. tonight at the Parliament building. The two sides exchanged views in a friendly atmosphere. The anchor's clear and melodious voice came from the loudspeaker in the square. Xiaoheng nonchalantly blew out a smoke ring, looked up and suddenly froze. On the big screen, a beautiful girl with black hair and fair skin appeared. She was smiling and drinking with a handsome man with blue eyes and blonde hair, who had a religious sense of asceticism. From his point of view he could practically see sparks flying as the two of them stared at each other. This was the first night watch. Today was the third night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation votes and monthly votes. The monthly votes were 5,400 plus updates at 1 p.m. and the third night watch at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you, Nan and Zhu, for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 1073. Why would Gun Yanji attend such an occasion? Judging from her position, it didn't seem like it was low. In any case, it was more than the treatment of an intern. Xiaoheng crossed his arms and leaned against the car door with a poker face. He held a cigarette in one hand, and the sparks of the cigarette burned silently, reflecting his anxious heart. However, nothing could be seen on the surface. He wore a Bluetooth headset and listened to the staff's dispatch and duty situation while still performing his task with a high degree of nervousness. At this time, no matter what the situation was, he could only suppress his anger and wait until he completed his task before going back to settle the score with them. Xiaoheng closed his eyes and slowly exhaled. He pulled back his scattered thoughts and focused his attention on the downtown area. He calmly looked at the ground in front of him. 7 years ago, Gun Yanji's car had suddenly caught fire here and caught his attention. When he rushed in, broke the stuck seat belt and carried Gun Yanji out, the car exploded on the spot. The energy of the explosion was so great that it blasted a deep pit in the ground and even sent a mushroom cloud into the sky. The raging fire burned so thoroughly that the car was burned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Not even a speck of it was left. Xiaoheng recalled what happened 7 years ago to calm his emotions. However, the evening news on the big screen in front of him was endless. A German delegation to China was broadcasting, 5 minutes long. Xiaoheng occasionally looked up and saw the footage of Gun Yanji and the German Reinitz. How much did the director like this pair? Was he going to shoot a 360-degree wide-angle shot with no blind spots? Xiaoheng put one hand in his trouser pocket and wanted to take out another cigarette. At this time, the pedestrians on the street also noticed that there were eye-catching handsome men and women on tonight's evening news. One by one they stopped and watched with relish. Wow. I never knew that a Wuxia girl and a German hunk could be so compatible. Xiaoheng silently turned his head. Compatible? How blind was he? Did his left and right eyes have a visual acuity of 0? Yes. Look at that German hunk. He's so handsome that even the heavens are angry. Look at his military uniform, his epaulets, and his hands, and his eyes. Oh my. I'm so jealous of the girl opposite him. Although I'm not as pretty as her, I still have to say something. Let this German hunk go. Let me handle it. A few girls stood not far from Xiaoheng and giggled. Their voices grew louder and louder, gradually attracting more and more passers-by to stop and watch. Xiaoheng's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. The calmness that he had forcibly restrained just now was almost out of control. With a solemn face, he turned around and entered his car. He took his laptop from the passenger seat and typed quickly, connecting it to the electronic screen system of the building opposite. A minute later, the big screen on the building suddenly flashed and then went black. The screen turned black. How come it's gone? How annoying. I haven't recorded it with my phone yet. A few of the girls grumbled their disapproval. There's a live broadcast on your phone. Go and take a screenshot. They quickly found a new place on their phones and continued to watch the evening news. The ratings for tonight's evening news must be through the roof. The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's mouth twitched. He closed the laptop and tossed it aside. Out of sight, out of mind. He leaned against the driver's seat and wanted to close his eyes to rest, but before long, Song Jinning's voice came through the Bluetooth headset. Xiaoheng? Xiaoheng? Come here for a moment. Song Jinning's voice was surprised and anxious. There was even a slight tremble in it. Her voice was almost an octave higher than usual. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes snapped open and he opened the door to get out of the car. He hurried over to the van where Song Jinning was. He walked past the group of girls who had their heads down to watch the live broadcast of the evening news on their phones, creating a gust of wind. One of the girls raised her head in dissatisfaction and was about to reprimand someone for not looking where they were going when she inadvertently saw Hua Xiaoheng's side profile. She was instantly stunned and even more excited than when she saw the blonde, blue-eyed German handsome guy on TV. She was so excited that she couldn't speak. After a while, Hua Xiaoheng had already entered the large van in front of her. The girl finally came back to her senses and said dreamily, "Oh my God! I just saw a handsome guy from our Huaxia Empire. His looks aren't inferior to that blonde guy at all. In fact, he's even better." "Is that true? It's so dark. How can you see? Are your eyes playing tricks on you?" Her companions teased her with a smile. No one believed her. Hua Xiaoheng was actually wearing a low, wide-brimmed military cap that covered his entire forehead. He was also in the dark, so almost no one could see his appearance. Being caught a glimpse of by a girl was already his limit. Hua Xiaoheng entered Song Jinning's car and saw her in the middle of 2 rows of large flashing instruments. Her fingers were tapping on the keyboard and she was recording data on the computer. "What's wrong?" Hua Xiaoheng asked calmly as he leaned over to look at the data on Song Jinning's laptop. Song Jinning pointed at the rising data and said excitedly, "Xiaoheng, look at these data. This means that the magnetic field is becoming more and more obvious and stronger. I don't know how strong it will be, but I can tell you that the strength of the magnetic field this time is the strongest we've ever recorded. It's already broken the record." The Huaxia Empire's first observation record of this magnetic field was 20 years ago. It was this set of magnetic field data that prompted the military to cooperate with the Institute of High Energy Physics. At the time, the director of the Institute of High Energy Physics, Song Haichuan, was in charge of a secret experiment. They wanted to perfectly replicate this set of naturally occurring magnetic field data in the laboratory. In the end, something went wrong and the experiment failed. A strong magnetic storm appeared in the magnetic field, causing all the electronic equipment in the laboratory to not only fail but also cause an unexpected explosion. The appearance of a strong magnetic field can allow us to perfect the observation data. It will be decisive for us to continue the experiment that was interrupted 17 years ago. Song Jinning talked non-stop as her hands moved faster and faster. Because the data on both sides of the instruments were also moving faster and faster, it was almost impossible to distinguish in the end. Hua Xiaoheng watched for a while and said, "There should be surveillance video here, right? When the video is played back, we can better perfect the data by watching it frame by frame." Song Jinning nodded. "Of course. I'm doing a preliminary analysis now. For a detailed analysis, I have to go back and re-enter the data according to the surveillance video." As she spoke, she looked at the preliminary data analysis on the computer and gradually realized that there were some problems with the data recorded in her hands. "Xiaoheng." Song Jinning's voice trembled. "Something's wrong." "What's wrong?" Hua Xiaoheng immediately held Song Jinning's arm and was ready to drag her out of the car at any time. It was the second night watch and the monthly tickets had been delivered. It was the third night watch today. A reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the third night watch. Chapter 1074. The numbers are rising too fast. It's almost at the critical point. Song Jinning struggled with all her might. "Let go of me. I'll go turn off the equipment." Hua Xiaoheng turned around and saw the 2 rows of equipment suddenly glow red. All the numbers shot up like crazy and quickly crossed the red line at the top. The numbers were off the charts. Then there was a crisp bang. The two rows of equipment simultaneously emitted blue-purple electric sparks, scurrying in the enclosed space of the van like silver snakes. Hua Xiaoheng reflexively pulled Song Jining over, then turned around and pushed her out of the van. This action caused him to inevitably turn his back to the instruments that were already sparking with electricity. Fortunately, he was wearing the best number 5 soft bulletproof vest under his thin military uniform. It could even block bullets from semi-automatic submachine guns, so he wasn't afraid of being hurt by the electric sparks. Besides, how could the electric sparks be faster than bullets? Before the hot electric sparks landed on his back, Hua Xiaoheng had already leaped out of the car door. Behind him continued to crackle like firecrackers, or occasionally like frying beans. The crackling sound quickly attracted the attention of passers-by. Hua Xiaoheng quickly pulled Song Jining out of the van and immediately gave orders to his men through his Bluetooth headset. Accident. Lock down the scene. Call fire trucks and ambulances. Roger. Lockdown of Area 1 complete. Roger. Lockdown of Area 2 complete. Roger. Lockdown of Area 7 complete. The personnel of the Special Operations Forces divided the area into 7 areas for security. In less than a minute, all 7 areas were locked down and cleared. All that was left was for the ambulances and fire trucks to arrive. The girls who had been looking at their phones were also asked to leave the lockdown area. They were extremely dissatisfied and shouted loudly, "What happened? Why is there no phone signal?" Not only was there no phone signal, but the entire area began to lose power. One by one, the tall buildings fell into darkness. Even the street lights on the streets went out one by one. The downtown area, which had been brightly lit a moment ago, was instantly plunged into darkness. Power outage? Why would there be a power outage at this time? Yeah. There's no wind or rain, why would there be a power outage? I want to file a complaint. Everyone expressed their dissatisfaction. At that moment, an even louder cry came from the crowd. Look up. Look at the sky. Colorful halos suddenly lit up on the dark blue sky against the skyscrapers, swaying beautifully in the night sky. It was as if someone had knocked over a bucket of fluorescent paint. Using the sky as a curtain and light as a brush, they were painting abstract paintings with thick and heavy colors. Song Jining held her laptop and looked up at the halo belt in the sky. She was so surprised that she couldn't close her mouth. Even the aurora has appeared, she murmured. She even rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, worried that she was seeing things. Not only was there no cell signal and internet connection, but there was also no electricity. However, Hua Xiaoheng's mood miraculously improved. Still shielding Song Jining behind him, he calmly smiled and asked, "Why is there an aurora here? Miss Song, you've carved a boat for a sword, haven't you?" Song Jining rolled her eyes at Hua Xiaoheng and reprimanded him. "You're the one who's trying to find a way out. Miss Song will give you a free lesson. The aurora appeared here because we just had a high-energy magnetic storm. You see, all communication has been paralyzed and the circuit system has been greatly affected. It has automatically tripped. There's also an even higher energy from the magnetic storm, which was released in the form of an aurora. Tell me, why can't there be an aurora here?" Hua Xiaoheng. Well, as expected, professionals did professional things. Of course, Hua Xiaoheng was definitely not as good as Miss Song in terms of high-energy physics. He admitted it without any psychological burden. At this time, the middle of the downtown intersection and the small square next to it had been sealed off. A large number of people were on the curb opposite the intersection, holding their phones up to the sky to take pictures of the astronomical spectacle that had just appeared. Hua Xiaoheng turned around to look at the large van with the equipment installed. He found that although there were electric sparks and a small fire inside, it wasn't very serious. He calmly observed the van until the fire truck drove over and aimed a fire extinguisher at the van. The electric sparks went out very quickly and the van was charred black. The 2 rows of equipment were definitely useless, but the data should be fine because these equipment were synchronized to the cloud system. Although the data in the equipment was gone, there were still backups stored in the cloud system. Hua Xiaoheng could also take the hard drive in the equipment to the professionals in the department and try to see if they could recover it. He stood in front of the van with his hands behind his back, his brows furrowed. The fire was also in this strange magnetic field, so why didn't this car explode into a mushroom cloud like Gunyanji's car? Why did it burn so thoroughly that there was no residue left? Only the inside of the car had been burned, and the outer shell was still fine. Could it be that the source of the explosion in Gunyanji's car wasn't in the magnetic field, but in the car she was in? If that was the case, then the accident she experienced wasn't an accident at all, but a murder. Hua Xiaoheng's fingers clenched tightly, and the lines of his jaw tightened. His gaze was as sharp as an eagle's in the dark, and his handsome face had a unique charm that shocked people. Even the aurora above his head paled in comparison to him. Song Jining kept sighing beside him. How could this be? How could this be? Why is the magnetic field so strong this time? It doesn't make sense. Hua Xiaoheng asked without turning his head, what happens to the magnetic field after the magnetic storm? After the magnetic storm, the magnetic field disappears. Song Jining looked at Hua Xiaoheng like he was an idiot. The magnetic field is energy, and the magnetic storm consumed all the energy, so of course the magnetic field would disappear. Xiaoheng, didn't you graduate from university? Hua Xiaoheng ignored Song Jining's teasing and asked again, are you sure all the energy was released? Do you have any instruments to measure it? Song Jining said regretfully, there's one more, but it's not as professional as the two in the car. But it can still measure the energy of the magnetic field. Where is the machine? In the branch office over here. Song Jining pointed in the direction they had come from. There. Hua Xiaoheng immediately ordered his subordinates to retrieve the instrument through his Bluetooth headset. 10 minutes later, the simple magnetic field measuring instrument was sent over. Song Jining quickly operated it, and 10 minutes later she was convinced. It's gone. The magnetic field has completely disappeared, and all the energy has been released. The enchanting and dazzling aurora in the night sky finally began to slowly fade. The nearby buildings began to brighten up again, and the street lamps also lit up. The power was restored, as were cell phone communications and the internet. Hua Xiaoheng looked up at the night sky, took a deep breath and said, Miss Song, I'm going back to the capital right away. Will you go back with me? At this time, almost all the television stations in the country were broadcasting this breaking news. The aurora that only appears in the North and South Poles suddenly appeared in the sky above Sea City. It was the third watch. It was the third watch today. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes and monthly votes. Good night, sweethearts. Chapter 1075. At the same time, not only was the Wuxia Empire's TV news broadcasting this breaking news, but almost all of the Blue Planet's TV stations stopped their normal broadcasts to broadcast this astronomical wonder that had appeared in the Wuxia Empire. The United States, European Union countries, South America, and even Africa and Oceania. Needless to say, other Asian countries were completely dominated by this breaking news. This news shocked the world. Countless astronomers grabbed their phones without hesitation and booked tickets to the Wuxia Empire's Sea City. They wanted to study it carefully. Why would an aurora appear in a place like this? Some countries' intelligence agencies also quickly took action. The CIA was the most enraged and shocked. How could such a high-energy magnetic storm appear in the Wuxia Empire? You trash. We spent so much money to let you operate in the Wuxia Empire. Where did you spend the money? Did you feed it to the dogs? Major General Hillen, the director of the CIA, was furious. He cursed at his trusted subordinates in his office and smashed his keyboard and coffee cup, but he still couldn't vent his anger. He panted and glared at his subordinates. He pointed at them and asked, "Speak. Where did all your money go?" His subordinates looked at each other and said awkwardly, "Ever since the Wuxia Empire established the Special Operations Forces, their intelligence agencies have been split up. The people we planted in the past can't get in. Even so much money? After so many years and billions of dollars spent, is this how you work?" Major General Hillen glared at them maliciously. His expression instantly became fierce and terrifying. "Even if the Special Operations Forces can't plant people in, we can still spend money elsewhere. We can at least hear something, right? Don't let me find out that you're embezzling money." "Your Excellency, we're not embezzling money." His subordinates were anxious. "Look at the Wuxia Empire's Weibo. Many of the VIPs and public guides receive funds from us. We spend a lot of money every month." Yes. The Wuxia Empire's manpower has been rising rapidly recently, so the funds are also being spent quickly. Major General Hillen of the CIA frowned. "You're saying that you spent money on the Wuxia Empire's Weibo? The dogs you raise are all on Weibo?" His subordinates nodded together. "Most of them are. They're easy to find." Major General Hillen. After a while he suddenly stood up and kicked over his desk. He gritted his teeth and cursed, "What a bunch of F***king trash. Those keyboard warriors on Weibo who only know how to boast are useless. Listen up, cut off their funding and spend the money on people who have access to confidential information. I want to know why the Aurora appeared in the Wuxia Empire. If you don't find anything in 3 days, I'll get a new batch of people. All of you get lost." His subordinates obediently agreed and left his office while wiping their sweat. After they left, Major General Hillen wiped his face and immediately put away the fury on his face. He looked at the old-fashioned telephone on his desk and pondered for a moment. He reached out and took the phone, dialed a few numbers and called the secret laboratory. Last time, the laboratory in this secret base was almost single-handedly destroyed by the Pink Piggy. He didn't know how the reconstruction was going. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked it up. It was the person in charge of the secret laboratory, Mr. X, who spoke. "Hillstrom?" Major General Hillen nodded. "It's me." His voice was calm and neutral. The fury and anger from before had completely disappeared, as if he had become another person. "What's the matter? Do you know about the Aurora that appeared in the Wuxia Empire?" The person in charge, Mr. X, was silent for a long time before finally saying, "I know. How could I not know?" The last sentence was said with a hint of jealousy. The director of the CIA, Major General Hillen, chuckled. "Mr. X, do you have an explanation?" "As far as I know, Aurora can't appear outside the North and South Poles." "Yes." The person in charge of the secret laboratory, Mr. X, replied dryly with a straight face, "But there are exceptions. In theory, as long as the magnetic storm reaches a certain level, the Aurora can appear anywhere." "Then you mean that a high-energy magnetic storm really appeared in the Wuxia Empire?" "Of course. What else do you think? Make a movie?" The person in charge of the secret laboratory, Mr. X, looked angry and dissatisfied. "But I don't believe they have such technology. They must have stolen it from us. Our laboratory system had just been breached by the Pink Piggy, and now the Wuxia Empire has such a high-energy magnetic storm. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence?" The director of the CIA, Major General Hillen, was both surprised and pleasantly surprised. "You mean we also have this technology?" "Yes, it's not difficult at all," Mr. X drawled, finally sounding a little arrogant. "We have a lot of technology that is ahead of the Blue Planet. We just haven't disclosed it." "Mr. X, you're so amazing." Major General Hillen laughed heartily. He was in a very good mood. "Then I'm relieved. As for the Wuxia Empire, you're saying that they absolutely don't have the ability to develop this technology on their own." Based on the magnetic storm equivalent he had obtained, he was very worried that the Wuxia Empire had made a breakthrough in some kind of technology that would clear the final obstacle to the creation of the ultimate magnetic storm weapon, such as a magnetic storm gun that could paralyze the entire city's power system with one shot. For the United States, this kind of high-performance magnetic storm gun was still in the experimental stage in the laboratory and had not been equipped for the U.S. military special forces. Mr. X shook his head with incomparable arrogance. "That's impossible. Even we don't have the ability to develop this technology on our own. How can they do it? The United States is the greatest country on the Blue Planet. If they can't do it, then other countries definitely can't do it either. If other countries can do it, then it must be because they stole their technology." Major General Hillen nodded with satisfaction. "Then I'm relieved. As long as you guarantee it, I can peel off a layer of the Wuxia Empire's skin. I'll force them to spit out what they stole." In the banquet hall of the Wuxia Empire's Parliament building, the banquet was already coming to an end. At this time, the big screen on the wall suddenly turned on and broadcasted the breaking news from Sea City. The aurora that only appears in the North and South Poles suddenly appeared in the sky above Sea City. Half an hour had passed since the appearance of the aurora until the current live broadcast of the news. The cause and effect of the incident had become more detailed. News reporters from major television stations had arrived at the scene with live broadcast cameras. They filmed the aurora that remained in the night sky while interviewing the citizens present. In the television station's live broadcast room, the anchor was connected to well-dressed and knowledgeable professors and listened to them explain how this phenomenon appeared. Gunyenji and Reinitz also looked at the big screen together. When she saw the familiar intersection in Sea City appear on the big screen, Gunyenji made a sound of surprise in her heart. She had lived in Sea City for 6 years and was very familiar with this intersection. That was the starting point of her memory. Everything about her seemed to have started from that place. She couldn't remember anything before that. On the big screen, the reporters were interviewing the pedestrians there. "We saw a car suddenly catch fire over there. Then someone came to maintain order and drove us away. After that, there was a power outage. We couldn't get through to the phone, and the internet was also disconnected. At that time, no one knew what had happened until they saw the aurora appear in the sky. A few young girls chattered to the reporters about what they had seen with their own eyes. They were very excited to be able to attend such a grand event. Gunyanji's eyes slowly widened. She held onto the table and slowly stood up. Her hands were so tight that the veins on the back of her hands were bulging. Reinitz's attention was mostly on Gunyanji. Seeing her body stiffen and her expression change, his heart skipped a beat. He reached over and gently patted her tense shoulder. "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Gunyanji's entire body trembled. She used all her self-control to restrain herself from losing her composure. But how could she not lose her composure? When she saw the burning van appear on the big screen, she almost screamed out loud. The location was almost the same as the car she had been in 7 years ago. She still remembered when the explosion had sounded and Hua Xiaoheng had held her tightly against his chest. She had seen the skyline and the tall buildings not far away through his shoulder. That scene was too profound for her. It was a high-resolution photo stored in the depths of her memory. From time to time, it would appear in the depths of her mind and appear in her nightmares as a teenager. Now that she saw that scene, it was as if her nightmare had suddenly come true. Or perhaps it was as if she had suffered twice and suffered twice. Fear instantly engulfed her entire body. She couldn't help trembling and her teeth chattered. Reinitz saw that the blood had suddenly drained from her face. She was terrifyingly pale. He quickly touched her hand with the back of his hand and found that her hand was also cold. He thought she had caught a cold. Without thinking, he took off his military jacket and draped it over Gunyanji. This was the first night watch. Today was the third night watch. A reminder to everyone about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. The monthly tickets were 5,700 plus updates at 1 p.m. and the third night watch at 7 p.m. Moi. Chapter 1076. Gunyanji's entire body was cold, and her back was covered in cold sweat. Her mind was blank, just like a patient with severe hypoglycemia. Her vision was so dark that she couldn't see the big screen clearly. She blinked her eyes and a wave of hot air assaulted her, wrapping her up. Her consciousness was brought back by this wave of hot air. She looked down at the front of her and saw Reinitz's slender and strong fingers holding the military jacket on her shoulders. In the dead of night, Hijichu was still working in front of the computer. Since he had decided to stay, there were too many things he had to do. As for the He family in South America, since when Shui had left, he had to personally handle all the big and small matters. He wasn't used to such trivial matters, so he worked patiently for a while, but still couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He thought he should find a few more capable assistants or secretaries. When the text notification sounded on his phone, Hijichu had just sent out a few emails. This text notification ringtone was the highest level on his phone. Hijichu took the phone and saw the notification on the phone. Watch TV. Hijichu was speechless. He rarely watched TV, and he would rather drink red wine alone than turn on the TV when he had free time. However, since this special message reminded him to watch TV, he walked to the living room and picked up the remote control to turn on the TV. What do you think caused the aurora this time? After all, auroras only existed in the North and South Poles. Almost all the TV channels were talking about this incident. Aurora appeared over Sea City at around 9 o'clock that night. Hijichu's expression froze slightly. He threw the remote control away and returned to his computer. He opened the web browser and found that the internet was also flooded with news about this. He entered a website and went to check it out. It wasn't done by the United States. It probably wasn't done by the Huaxia Empire either. They didn't have this technology yet. Hijichu returned to the news and carefully read a detailed report. He then opened the website of the news website to find the specific location of the incident. When he saw the familiar crossroads in Sea City, Hijichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes were solemn and cold. He couldn't believe it. He really couldn't believe it. Did it really have something to do with that person? Why did he do this? Hijichu's heart tightened. He grabbed the phone and dialed Gunyanji's number. Gunyanji was wearing Reinitz's military uniform and holding a cup of hot cocoa. She stood near the golden velvet curtains because she was closer to the air conditioner vent, so it was warmer. It was early spring and the nights in the imperial capital were still very cold. The central air conditioner was blowing warm air. Just as she took a sip of hot cocoa, she heard the sound of a phone call in her Bluetooth headset. She used voice to turn on the phone and answer the call. It was He Jichu's voice. It was his usual cool and indifferent voice, but there was a hint of imperceptible nervousness. "Nianji, where are you?" In times of fear, people would develop a strong attachment to familiar things. When Gu Nianji heard He Jichu's familiar voice, it was like a drowning person grabbing onto a piece of driftwood. She felt that He Jichu was extremely familiar. In a hoarse voice she said, "I'm at the Senate building. I want to go home." Her voice involuntarily carried a tinge of grievance, like a child acting spoiled to her parent. Reinitz's hand paused. He gently turned his head away and looked out the window. He couldn't believe that when he heard Gu Nianji's voice on the phone, he actually felt a moment of regret. Gu Nianji wasn't acting spoiled to him. He Jichu immediately said, "Come out. I'll take you home." However, when he took the car keys out, He Jichu asked again, "Where's Huashao? Isn't he with you?" Gu Nianji's safety should be fully under Huashaoheng's responsibility now. Gu Nianji sniffled and quickly glanced at Reinitz. Seeing that he was looking elsewhere, she took out her phone and sent He Jichu a text. "Nianzi is here. He's not here." The subtext was that he went on a mission. He Jichu saw the text and cursed in his heart before getting out of the elevator. Gu Nianji wanted to leave early. She looked around and saw that Speaker Long was not far from her. She quickly took off Reinitz's military jacket and put it back in his hands. She then walked over to Speaker Long and said, "Speaker Long, I'm not feeling well. I'll go back first." Speaker Long originally planned to have a meeting with his trusted subordinates after the banquet to discuss today's situation. He wanted Gu Nianji to participate as well. However, when he looked up and saw Gu Nianji's pale face, Speaker Long immediately changed his mind and asked with concern, "Were you not feeling well? Did you catch a cold?" Gu Nianji reluctantly nodded and said in a low voice, "I think I caught a cold last night. I'll go back and sleep. I'll be fine tomorrow." "It's okay. Go back and rest well. If you still don't feel well tomorrow, rest at home." Speaker Long felt it was a pity that Gu Nianji couldn't attend the bilateral meeting tomorrow, but for him, health was more important. He never advocated working when one was sick. Gu Nianji nodded. "If I'm fine tomorrow, I'll go to work. If I'm still not feeling well, I'll really have to take a few days of sick leave." Speaker Long agreed and even wanted to find someone to send her back. Gu Nianji declined Speaker Long's proposal and said with a smile, "I called a car. Someone will pick me up." Reinitz had been by her side the whole time. When he heard that, he was confused. Gu Nianji sensed Reinitz's gaze on her. Although it was a little prickly, she could handle it. Gu Nianji calmly said goodbye to Speaker Long and the people from the Senate Secretariat, then turned to leave the banquet hall. Reinitz thought about it, then grabbed a German man and said in German, "I have something to do tonight. You don't have to wait for me." The German man nodded quickly. On the surface, their delegation to China seemed to be the core of the female prime minister. But even as the prime minister, she had to act according to He Jichu's mood and was polite and respectful to him. Of course, the staff member who accompanied the delegation didn't dare to put on airs in front of Reinitz. He quickly said, "Okay, I'll pass on the message to the prime minister." Reinitz caught up with Gu Nianji in the hallway outside the banquet hall of the Senate building and said with a smile, "Miss Gu, you left in such a hurry that you forgot your bodyguard in the banquet hall." Gu Nianji turned around in surprise. "No, I didn't bring a bodyguard." Her bright eyes flashed with the word, "innocent." It was as if the woman who had deduced the trajectory of his growth from just a few words was just a figment of his imagination. Reinitz felt a sense of excitement at meeting his match. He pointed to himself and said with a smile, "That's me, Miss Gu. May I have the honor of being your escort?" Gu Nianji was speechless. "It's cold outside. Put my jacket on first and return it to me when we get in the car," Reinitz said as he draped the military jacket over his arm over Gu Nianji's shoulders. 15 minutes later, He Jichu's sports car stopped in front of the Senate building. Sitting in the car, He Jichu saw Gu Nianji through the transparent window. Under the tall white pillars, she wore a German Army Major General's uniform. The uniform was a bit large, so it made her look even smaller. He Jichu also saw Reinitz standing next to Gu Nianji. He stood very close to Gu Nianji. From He Jichu's perspective, he felt that Reinitz's other hand was definitely resting on Gu Nianji's waist. The anger in He Jichu's heart instantly rose. He got out of the car with a dark expression and came to Gu Nianji and Reinitz's side. He threw a punch at Reinitz's face. He said coldly in German, "Stay away from her. Don't let me see you deliberately getting close to her again." It was the second night watch, and the monthly ticket arrived at 5,700 plus one night watch. It was the third night watch. It was 7 in the evening. Moi. Chapter 1077. Reinitz had received special training since he was a child, and his skills were among the best in the German special forces. But he didn't dodge Hijichu's punch. He only had time to turn his head and avoid the sharpest part of Hijichu's punch. He tried his best to protect his head from being hit. Gunyenji was stunned for a moment, but she quickly understood. She remembered the time Hijichu and Hua Xiaoheng fought fiercely at her house. Reinitz wasn't stronger than Hua Xiaoheng, so Hijichu didn't have to use much effort to beat him. Gunyenji's large, intelligent eyes looked between Hijichu and Reinitz. Hijichu's words just now made her wonder if they knew each other. Hijichu's tone and meaning made it seem like he was talking to an acquaintance. All sorts of thoughts raced through her mind, but before they could take root, Hijichu had already pulled her over. He tore off the German military jacket she was wearing and threw it back to Reinitz. At the same time he took off his thin cashmere coat and draped it over Gunyenji. Gunyenji felt even warmer. She smiled apologetically at Reinitz. "I'm sorry, I'll be going now. Good night, Major General Reinitz." Reinitz held his military jacket in the crook of his arm as he stared at Hijichu. His eyes were dark and his expression was a bit gloomy. He was probably in a bad mood after being punched for no reason. The guards standing at the entrance of the building didn't move, as if they didn't see what was happening. Hijichu pointed in Reinitz's direction. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, he snorted coldly and took Gunyenji's arm to walk down the steps of the building. "My car is parked outside. Come with me to my place today." Hijichu didn't look at Gunyenji when he spoke. He was obviously in a bad mood. Gunyenji was speechless. But at this time she only wanted to go home. Gunyenji said tactfully, "Professor He, it's already past 10. I'll go home." She was worried Hijichu wouldn't agree, so she quickly added, "I'm not feeling well. Really, I already left early today." Hijichu put his hand on her forehead to feel it. She seemed to be having a fever. He was even more insistent. "Go to my place. If you continue having a fever at night, someone will take care of you. I can go find Brother Chin." Gunyenji blurted out, but she immediately remembered that Chinlai was at the Special Operations Forces Headquarters base. She had heard that the Special Operations Forces Headquarters base had been stricter recently, and outsiders were not allowed to enter. Hua Xiaoheng wasn't there, so it might not be convenient for her to be there. Before Gunyenji could finish her thoughts, Hijichu stopped her. "Chinlai? You've had enough. Come to my house for one night. Are you worried that Hua Xiaoheng will be unhappy? Then tell him not to go on a mission." At the end of his sentence, his voice had already raised, and it was obvious that he was in a terrible mood. Gunyenji didn't dare argue with him anymore. She said sheepishly, "That's not it. Hua Xiao won't be unhappy. He's just worried that Professor He won't be able to. What's inconvenient about it? You're even wearing a stranger's jacket and you still think it's inconvenient?" Hijichu's words were especially vicious when he was in a bad mood. Gunyenji shut her mouth and wisely stopped adding fuel to the fire. She obediently followed Hijichu into the car and drove in the direction of the B University professor's building. Hijichu's sports car's performance was very good. It was fast and stable and it didn't have the typical roar of a sports car at all. They soon arrived at B University. From the car, Gunyenji saw the female law graduate student dormitory that she used to live in. She rubbed her phone and almost called Ma Chichi. But looking at the time, it was almost 11 o'clock. She decided not to disturb her sleep. She followed Hijichu to his suite in the professor's building. Hijichu pointed in the direction of the guest room. "You'll be staying here. Your toiletries are all new. They're in the bathroom. I have some clothes for you to change into." Gunyenji was speechless. She was silent for a while, then asked, "Professor He, why do you have clothes for me here?" Hijichu turned his head uncomfortably. "I bought them a while ago. I didn't want to give them to you." Gunyenji laughed and didn't refuse pretentiously. She rubbed her increasingly hot forehead and mumbled, "Thank you, Professor He." She knew Hijichu's apartment very well. After all, she had been there for the past year, even though she was a student teaching assistant. She went to the guest room and first went to the bathroom to wash up. When she came out, she found that Hijichu had already placed her sleeping robe and clothes on the bed in the guest room. Gunyenji yawned and changed into her robe before falling asleep. Because of the series of shocks from before, she didn't sleep well that night. When Hijichu came to check on her in the middle of the night, he found that her face was flushed as if she was having a nightmare. She was mumbling something, but he didn't know what she was saying. Hijichu reached out to touch her forehead and found that it was burning. He took out his medical kit and took out an electronic thermometer to touch Gunyenji's forehead. The temperature was off the charts. However, Hijichu didn't seem surprised at all. He calmly returned the temperature to normal and tucked Gunyenji in. Then he put an ice pack on her forehead to cool her down. While he was waiting, Gunyenji's brows furrowed even more. "Daddy, Daddy, I want Daddy." She began to whimper and cry. Her hands reached out from under the blanket and scratched wildly. Hijichu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly grabbed her hand and shoved it back under the blanket. Gunyenji sobbed in her dream for a while. Perhaps Hijichu's approach made her feel something, but after a while she called out pitifully, "Brother?" It was the tone she used when she was with Hijichu when she was young. Hijichu's nose suddenly ached. With trembling hands, he touched Gunyenji's head and whispered in her ear in a gentle tone that he had never used before. "Brother, he is here. He won't go anywhere. He will always be with you." His comfort gradually took effect. Gunyenji didn't continue to cry in her dream. Although her teeth were still tightly clenched and her brows were tightly furrowed, she didn't cry uncontrollably like before. For a dreamer, this meant that the dreamer had control over the dream. There would be no more dreams that she couldn't bear. Hijichu propped his head up and sat by Gunyenji's bed to look at her. From time to time he changed the ice pack on her forehead. After an unknown amount of time, a phone suddenly rang in the silence. "Priest, temple, war, bow and arrow, whose past did you belong to me in the crowd?" Hijichu was speechless. He had heard this ringtone before. It was the exclusive ringtone that Gunyenji had set for Hua Xiaoheng on her phone. Hijichu looked around and found the direction of the ringtone. He walked over to pick up Gunyenji's phone. Seeing that the caller ID on the phone was Mr. A, Hijichu's lips twitched as he picked up the call. "Nyenji, where are you?" Hua Xiaoheng's deep and magnetic voice came from the phone, but he sounded slightly anxious. Hijichu's shimmering, sultry eyes flashed as he said slowly, "I'm here. It was the third watch. It was the third watch today. Good night, sweethearts." Chapter 1078. Hua Xiaoheng was taken aback. "At your place?" "Yes, at my place on the bed next to me." Hijichu was in a bad mood and spoke very rudely. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. As soon as he finished speaking, the location on the computer in front of Hua Xiaoheng was completed. The coordinates that appeared on the screen were the B University professor's building Hijichu lived in. Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch expressionlessly. It was already 3:30 in the morning. He got off his private jet and drove to the Hepingli precinct where Gunyenji lived. At the same time, he turned on the satellite positioning system on his private jet to find Gunyenji's location. He knew that she should be sleeping at this time, but he still searched and called her phone. He was originally hesitant to call her at this time because it would frighten her. He didn't expect that he would be the one who would be frightened. Hua Xiaoheng rubbed his temples and restrained his deep and magnetic voice. "Hijichu, don't do anything rash. Nyenji treats you like family." "I'm rash?" Hijichu sneered as he changed another ice pack on Gunyenji's forehead. "So what if I'm rash? It's better than you not being by her side every time she's in danger. Hua Xiaoheng, I'm telling you, don't think that you already have Nyenji in your palm. I can make her leave you anytime I want. How dare you?" Hua Xiaoheng couldn't control his emotions for the first time and roared angrily. His right hand clenched into a fist and his knuckles cracked. A ruthless and cold-blooded expression flashed across his face. Fan Jian, the orderly driving in the front, was shocked and instinctively slammed on the brakes. The wheels of the bulletproof car screeched loudly on the highway. Hua Xiaoheng snapped back to reality and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and quickly calmed himself down. His momentary loss of composure seemed to have been a hallucination in the early hours of the morning. Fan Jian, the orderly driving in the front, felt that he must have been suffering from a severe lack of sleep. Not only was he hallucinating, but he was also hallucinating. Hijichu felt better when he heard Hua Xiaoheng's fierce reaction. The treasure he held in his palm would want others to hold it in their palm as well. If not, he would take it back without hesitation. Hijichu hung up and looked at Gunyenji with a complicated expression. Her temperature had dropped to 40 degrees Celsius. For most people it was still a high fever, but for her she was already out of danger and back to normal. He held Gunyenji's hand and kissed the back of it. She was born for him. From the moment she was born, she was his responsibility. It was a treasure that he would cherish for the rest of his life. Baby, he only wanted her well. As long as she lived a good life, he would not care about anything. Hijichu knew that he had never been a generous person, much less a noble and selfless person. His methods were brutal and vengeful. He never knew what it meant to give in and let go. However, in front of Gunyenji, he had become a true saint. If the people in his hometown saw him like this, they would definitely be shocked. Hijichu forced a smile as he tucked Gunyenji's hand back under the blanket. Hua Xiaoheng's elbow rested on the side of the car window as he stared coldly at the bright lights outside. Late at night in the early spring, the imperial capital was still brightly lit. It was a scene of fireworks and silver flowers that never slept. His heart was burning with anxiety, but his expression did not change as he quietly waited for his car to enter the B University campus. Fan Jian received his instructions and got off the highway to Hepingli. He turned onto the 4th Ring Road and drove for another half an hour before he saw the B University South Gate not far away. Under the night sky, the B University South Gate stood tall and plain. The shiny iron fence in front of the gate was lined up, so it was impossible to drive directly in. Fan Jian abruptly honked the horn at the gate. The night guard at the south gate of B University raised his head to take a look and squinted when he saw the car headlights. When he saw the license plate, the guard immediately sobered up. He quickly turned on the lights twice and pressed a button to open the iron fence to let Hua Xiaoheng's car in. Hua Xiaoheng was followed by a motorcade of 7 or 8 cars. However, only his bulletproof car entered the campus. The other cars were quietly parked by the road. The black military vehicles had a solemn and dignified aura. They were so intimidating that the cars on the road couldn't help but slow down. Hua Xiaoheng arrived at Hijichu's building and called Gunyenji's phone again. Hijichu walked to the window with the phone in hand and opened the curtains to look down. Under the streetlight in front of the building was a modified black Hummer military vehicle. It was longer and wider than a typical Hummer SUV and had a sturdier chassis. It was said to be the same model as the steel plates used in tanks and armored vehicles. Hijichu picked up the phone and didn't argue with Hua Xiaoheng anymore. He said in a low voice, "Nianji is sick. She's running a fever." Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. He thought about it and opened the door to get out. "I'll come up to take a look. Major General Hua is busy every day. You should go do your mission." Hijichu mocked him and said leisurely, "If Nianji can't endure it this time, I'll burn 3 sticks of incense on your behalf. She'll be able to rest in peace." Hua Xiaoheng's expression was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He kicked the car door shut with a loud bang. He walked quickly to the lobby of the professor's building without looking back. The corners of Hijichu's mouth twitched. He closed the curtains and put away his phone before going to the kitchen to make coffee. When the doorbell rang, Hijichu had just put the coffee beans into the coffee machine. He turned on the coffee machine's automatic transmission and went to open the door for Hua Xiaoheng. As soon as the door opened, a fist mercilessly smashed towards his face along with the whistling sound of the wind. Although Hijichu had been mentally prepared and was well trained, he still couldn't dodge the punch. The side of his left eye was scratched, and the corner of his eye instantly turned purple. Only then did he realize that when he fought with Hua Xiaoheng had gone easy on him. Hijichu's mind raced as he quickly retreated to the right. At the same time, his left leg flew up to kick Hua Xiaoheng's chest. If Hua Xiaoheng wanted to dodge the kick, he would have no choice but to retreat. At that time, Hijichu could take the opportunity to close the door again and teach this ungrateful person a lesson. He didn't expect Hua Xiaoheng's right arm to be as steady as a mountain in front of his chest. He abruptly raised it to block the flying leg and used the momentum to push forward. As a result, the one who had to retreat to stabilize himself was Hijichu. Taking advantage of Hijichu's retreat, Hua Xiaoheng had already entered the house and rushed to the guest room where Gunyenji was. By the time Hijichu steadied himself, Hua Xiaoheng had already entered the room. Hijichu sneered as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He closed the door and went to his bedroom to check on his injuries. Hua Xiaoheng arrived at the guest room where Gunyenji was staying. As soon as he entered, he saw her sleeping quietly on the bed with a blanket wrapped around her. There was a small ice pack on her forehead. Her breathing was steady and her brows were relaxed. Her plump lips had a natural curvature. Other than her extremely pale face, he couldn't tell that she was sick. Hua Xiaoheng watched from the door for a while before slowly walking to Gunyenji's bedside. He bent down to remove the ice pack and used the back of his hand to feel Gunyenji's forehead. Even though there was an ice pack on her forehead was still boiling hot. Hua Xiaoheng looked around and saw a small first aid kit placed not far away. The kit was half open, so Hijichu must have used it. Hua Xiaoheng walked over and found an electronic thermometer to measure Gunyenji's temperature. 40 degrees. Fortunately, Hua Xiaoheng also sighed in relief. He had seen Gu Nianji's off the charts before, so 40 degrees was indeed not bad for her. However, fever was the most damaging to one's vitality. Even though 40 degrees wasn't the highest temperature for Gu Nianji, the torture her body experienced was exactly the same as a normal person's. Her lips were dry and cracked like a withered flower, fragile like a feather. As long as a gust of wind blew, it would immediately scatter and disappear without a trace. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes ached when he recalled He Zhichu's angry words of burning incense on his behalf. He pursed his lips tightly and placed the ice pack on Gu Nianji's forehead before reaching under the blanket to touch her back. It was still boiling hot, but she wasn't sweating. The fever wouldn't go down if she didn't sweat. Hua Xiaoheng originally wanted to take Gu Nianji back, but seeing her like this, he couldn't just take her away like this. He Zhichu walked over and knocked on the door. He said, "I made coffee. Do you want some?" Hua Xiaoheng wasn't sleepy at all, and he wouldn't eat or drink outside casually. He waved his hand. "No thank you." He Zhichu wasn't surprised. He brought the Colombian black coffee over and sat on the other side. He asked Hua Xiaoheng bluntly, "Nianji went to receive the German delegation to China today. Did you ask her to go?" Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. He looked at Gu Nianji without blinking and slowly shook his head. "Would you believe me if I said no?" "I would." "Why wouldn't I believe you?" He Zhichu shrugged. "Reinitz is already here. If you still asked her to receive the German delegation, then I was wrong about you." He Zhichu and Hua Xiaoheng both knew what kind of person Reinitz was. They would never believe that Reinitz had any sincerity towards Gu Nianji. They were both men and it was almost an innate talent for them to put on a show. If Gu Nianji really was a little girl who hadn't seen the world, Reinitz could take advantage of her at any time. Hua Xiaoheng recalled the scene he saw on the big screen in Sea City, and he couldn't get rid of the frustration in his heart. However, he wouldn't mention this in front of He Zhichu. He only asked, "Then why did Professor He go to the Senate to pick up Nianji?" His question was sharp and direct, and He Zhichu was instantly speechless. After a while he slowly said, "I just can't stand Reinitz putting on an act. If I didn't go, Reinitz would be the one taking care of Nianji like this today." Hua Xiaoheng suddenly looked up at He Zhichu. His voice was hoarse. "What did you say? What the hell happened?" It was one thing for Reinitz and Gu Nianji to have a toast at the banquet, but how did it get to the point where he was taking care of her when she was sick? Hua Xiaoheng couldn't figure out what clues he had missed. Nianji saw the aurora in Sea City, and it was a huge shock to her, He Zhichu said simply. She had nightmares the first half of the night and kept calling for her father. Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. This was the first night watch. It was still the third night watch. Everyone's recommendation votes and monthly votes. The monthly votes were 6,000 plus updates at 1 p.m., and the third update was at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you to the leader Fish G for tipping 50,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Beth1211 for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Mwah. Chapter 1079. Hua Xiaoheng silently looked away and stared at Gu Nianji's sleeping face for a long time. Gu Nianji wasn't the only one who was shocked by the scene last night. Even Hua Xiaoheng, who had an unusually strong mental fortitude, was secretly shocked. However, he was shocked that the burnt car looked different from Gu Nianji's car. What was Gu Nianji shocked about? Hua Xiaoheng was silent for a while and thought of He Zhichu's strangeness. He glanced at him and suddenly asked, "Professor He, how did you know Nianji would be shocked by the aurora?" He Zhichu shook his head calmly. "I didn't know beforehand. I saw Nianji attend the banquet last night on TV, so I rushed to pick her up." He Zhichu raised his chin as he spoke, his shimmering, sultry eyes flashing. "When I got there, I saw Reinitz politely send Nianji out of the building and even put his jacket on her." Hua Xiaoheng's fists clenched even tighter, but his face remained calm and collected. He Zhichu glanced at Hua Xiaoheng's clenched fists and curled his lips. He continued to stab Hua Xiaoheng in the heart. At the time, his arm was around Nianji's waist. "I was angry when I saw it. Just like how you hit me when you came in, I also punched Reinitz." The harmonious image of Reinitz and Gu Nianji drinking together appeared in Hua Xiaoheng's mind again. He looked down calmly and chuckled. "Thank you, Professor He. When Nianji wakes up, I'll ask her what's going on. If Reinitz did that, it would be beneath his status." He Zhichu snickered. He crossed his legs and sat lazily on the sofa. His cool and indifferent voice did not contain any warmth. "Status? As the director of the German Federal Intelligence Service, Reinitz is just like you, Huo. He will do anything for the sake of his mission. Professor, he knows Reinitz well? Huo Xiaoheng took the opportunity to get information about Reinitz from He Jichu. However, He Jichu was not someone who could be easily fooled. He was well aware of Huo Xiaoheng's intentions and had no intention of giving Huo Xiaoheng advice. No, I don't understand Reinitz. He Jichu wagged his index finger. But I understand how people like you do things. When Huo Xiaoheng heard He Jichu say this, he knew that He Jichu was already on guard, so he didn't pursue the matter any further. Lowering his head, he took out his phone and sent Song Jining a message asking if she had arrived home safely. After they got off the plane, Huo Xiaoheng asked his people to send Song Jining back to her dorm at the Institute of High Energy Physics. He went to look for Gun Yanji as soon as he could. Not long after, his phone vibrated. It was a call from Song Jining. Huo Xiaoheng stood up and said to He Jichu, "I'll take a call." He Jichu didn't even look at him. He snickered. Major General Hua is indeed a busy man. Ignoring him, Huo Xiaoheng put on his Bluetooth headset and walked out of Gun Yanji's room to the balcony. Looking at his watch, it was almost 4:30. The sky was foggy and the darkness was thick. It was the darkest time before dawn. Huo Xiaoheng took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Miss Song, what's the matter?" After Song Jining returned to the dormitory to wash up, she couldn't fall asleep. She decided not to sleep and went straight to the lab. When Huo Xiaoheng sent her a text message, she had just finished the first round of initial analysis of the data downloaded from the cloud. "Xiaoheng. Even if it was a trap this time, it was worth it." Song Jining's cheerful voice came from the Bluetooth headset. It made people feel happy just listening to it. Huo Xiaoheng was extremely relaxed when he heard this kind of voice after a day of thrilling experiences. "Really? Miss Song, what did you find?" he asked with a chuckle. "Didn't I tell you that the magnetic field this time is stronger than any previous one?" Song Jining looked at the analysis results on the screen and was so excited that she almost danced with joy. "Yes, you did say that the magnetic field is stronger than any previous one on record." "Yes. One of the benefits of a strong magnetic field is that the data is clearer and more coherent." Song Jining simply printed out the data. "The magnetic field we detected in the past was much worse than this one. It can't be compared at all. Therefore, the data we obtained in the past was actually imperfect and incoherent. There are many missing places in the middle that we need to calculate and solve on our own." Huo Xiaoheng put his hands in his trouser pockets and quietly listened to Song Jining describe her findings. "This kind of calculation is very complicated, and because of the hardware and software, we still can't accurately calculate the missing places. The data used in the previous experiments were all vague, and we even used conjectures to replace some of the parts that couldn't be calculated, resulting in many errors and omissions in the data used in our experiments. I think I roughly understand why the experiment from 17 years ago failed. The hardware that Song Jining was talking about was the function of the supercomputer, which couldn't reach the precision and speed they needed to calculate. And the software was the specific algorithm. They hadn't found an optimal algorithm to calculate the missing data in the magnetic field. But now they could use the data measured in the field to overcome the shortcomings of the hardware and software. In other words, because of the strong magnetic field this time, it made up for the incomplete data caused by the weak magnetic field in the past." Huo Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat when he thought of this. "Miss Song, do you mean that we can restart the experiment right away?" "Major General Hua, you're thinking too fast." Song Jining's voice calmed down. "Do you know how long it will take to process so much data?" Huo Xiaoheng: "Miss Song, let me tell you, even with the most efficient supercomputer in your department, it will take 2 years to process it." Song Jining shook her head regretfully. "But that's how scientific research is. It takes years of monotonous and repetitive calculations and analysis to get the final results." Huo Xiaoheng was also a little disappointed, but this wasn't his job after all. He was only disappointed for a moment before he said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Miss Song. If you need to use our department's supercomputer, you can report to the military and use it after approval." He also hoped to restart the experiment as soon as possible. Only then would he be worthy of his grandfather, Song Haichuan, and his uncle, Huo Guanyuan, who had sacrificed their lives for the experiment. After Song Jining finished speaking to Huo Xiaoheng, she felt that her excitement could finally calm down. After so many years of hard work, she had finally made a major breakthrough today. Any normal person would be willing to share it with others. She wiped her face and began to integrate and analyze all the data based on the initial analysis results. Before that, she had to design a set of models to analyze the data. Hua Xiaoheng wanted to talk to Song Jining again, but found that her phone couldn't be reached. Ms. Song, who was extremely passionate about scientific research, had probably immersed herself in her work again. The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's mouth twitched. He turned off his phone and returned to the guest room where Gu Nianji was staying. He sat for a while and took a nap in the middle. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. Hua Xiaoheng opened his eyes and saw Gu Nianji's bright, black eyes looking at him with a smile. "Major General Hua, there's green stubble on your chin." Gu Nianji playfully reached out and gently scratched Hua Xiaoheng's chin, which had just revealed a green stubble. He Jichu suddenly felt that he couldn't look at her anymore. He stood up with a sullen face and walked out with his back stiff. The second monthly pass of 6,000 plus updates had been delivered. It was still the third night. 7 p.m. the third night. P.S. Vote for your monthly votes as soon as possible, dear ones. Let's see if we can stay in the top 10 this time. Let's do it together. Mwax. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.